OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, you're very welcome along. It's Monday morning. It is the weekend that Ireland have won again, and we're all a little bit like, oh, this is getting used to this, are we? It's getting a little bit too used to it. Get us on youtube.com/off the ball. Get us at Off the Ball AM on Twitter. We're live on OTB Sports Radio, and of course, many of you will be listening to this on podcasts. So we're delighted to have you with us. Also with us today, Colin, how are you?
Sure, good morning.
And Nathan, how are you?
Hey, Ger. That was a proper Monday morning intro to the show, wasn't it? The music started and you're like, there's definitely something that happens when this music comes on. What do I do next?
Well, no, we're excited. We're just overwhelmed by how good we are at rugby at the moment. We're going to get into that, obviously, in the performance rankings, so don't use any of your good lines right now.
This is it. This can be snappy. How was your weekend, for example?
No, no one cares about
Do you know?
No one cares about how my weekend was.
You never know.
They really don't. They really don't. You were waking up this morning to the news that Tommy Fury beat Jake Paul in Saudi Arabia. That's the main sports news this morning. Certainly it seems to be, according to like the BBC, and the whole Jake Paul thing largely passed me by.
Where was this broadcast? Was it
Pay-per-view.
Pay-per-view.
Oh, no.
Okay.
They've like it's going to be the biggest pay-per-view fight of the year. I saw Matthew Macklin on Instagram or Twitter yesterday going like, well, how do we even fix this sport? It's completely ruined. Like, what are we going to do here?
But have these sideshows not always happened in boxing? Like, is it doing any harm to boxing, or is it bringing teenagers who had really no interest in the sport into it, and they find themselves following it, and then they stick around for the good stuff?
Yeah, I don't think they stick around for the good stuff is the thing. They just they're getting sugared up on the prime, right?
Yeah.
And this is just the prime of boxing. Mm-hmm. And then they move on to the new prime.
Jake Paul must be making an absolute fortune.
I think that is the whole point. But now so is Tommy Fury. So, there you go. Was this important? Did this register in your sporting?
It was a contender, but I mean, it was mentioned in our pre-show meeting by a member of staff. What about that? I was, no. Because it can't compete with what everyone's about to see in the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
Hey, there you go. That's why he's a producer. Here's what's coming up between now and 10. I would honestly like to hear if any of the people who are watching this morning were watching last night, what they thought of it. So the performance rankings are coming up in 2 minutes. Alan Quinlan's going to join us in studio at 8:05 to look back on the Six Nations. Andy Mitten, Manchester United, a trophy. Alex Ferguson getting pictured with Ten Hag. Everybody at United feeling themselves. Ten Hag throwing a bone to the Glazers just in case they're sticking around. And maybe them sticking around is actually not the worst case scenario anymore. Maybe it's not. Anthony Moyles at 8:50, looking back on a weekend of Gaelic football where all of a sudden the Tailteann Cup is looking like a realistic thing for certainly Kildare. Sarah Donovan's going to join us at 9:15. We might talk a bit about Kyle Hayes and just how Limerick seems to be always getting away with it, according to my Twitter feed anyway, whereas actually a lot of people are like, oh, the witch hunt has already started, I see. So there you go. Pays you money, you take your choice this morning, and at 9:30 we'll play a snippet from the pay-per-view yesterday as well. But at 7:33 this morning, 2 minutes early, ahead of time, we're going to get into the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. Our performances was just lacked that intensity.
So normally we start in the red. We're making an exception for this.
Yes.
Nathan.
Starting with the green.
Yes.
That's right.
Welcome, Nathan. How are you?
Executive decision.
Nathan Murphy. This is the bit of the show where you take over.
This is my bit.
Yeah.
God damn it, I forgot about that. Yes, we're going to start with the green this time because we want a positive story on a Monday morning. Maybe we should make this a regular thing, actually. Instead of starting by giving out every Monday morning, maybe we start with a fresh mindset. And actually, there was good things that happened over the weekend, particularly if you're a Manchester United supporter. So Manchester United.
Just want to say mocking is catching. That's all. As your ma would have said when you were a child. Mocking is catching. Go on, Nathan. Go on. Take it away.
We'll start with Manchester United, then we'll get to Ireland rugby in a minute. So Manchester United, Carabao Cup winners, and boy did they celebrate it. Very straightforward win over Newcastle in the end. Not the most exciting of League Cup finals. Professional job done by United. They took their chances very well. A couple of goals in the space of 6 minutes. Their two standout players this season, Casemiro and Marcus Rashford, get the goals. And Newcastle having their little dip at just the wrong time of the season. There was about 150,000 Geordies in Trafalgar Square late into the night, thinking, finally, this is it. But they've now lost 9 straight games at Wembley. So all that money, all that Saudi lula, counted for nothing when it came to the big day at Wembley yet again. But Manchester United definitely feels as if this is the start of something rather than a one-off. I think the manner that they went into this, it was felt on the pitch like quite an emotionless victory, that they just knew they were a better team. They went about their business. Varane and Casemiro, like, you know, we've done all this before. We've won Champions League. This is a League Cup final, lads.
This was obvious, wasn't it? This was obvious. We were on Friday predicting what was going to happen here, and Colin was desperately trying not to, I can't expect that Manchester United are going to win because I won't enjoy it. But it was clear from about 4 weeks ago that Manchester United and Newcastle are on divergent paths at the moment, and that the strength and depth that Manchester United have and the quality of players that they have and the money that they've invested in the squad is superior to that at Newcastle at the moment. And it was clear that they were going to win, and if they didn't win, it was going to be a bit of a disaster. So I think you were just putting up a protected layer.
Oh,
yeah, you're like, I'm just gonna ask this person out. But if they don't, they're not really. It'd be fine if they said no. It doesn't really matter. But actually, it really matters.
No. It's part of a new era at Manchester United, and the League Cup is nice to have. It's the first trophy that he could possibly have won at the club, and he did, and that's great. But for instance, if United were to fall out of the top 4 at the end of the season and say get knocked out of the last 16 of the Europa League and FA Cup, then suddenly it's like, that was going so well for 3/4 of the season. So it's a nice momentum keeper, I suppose. But you have to look at it like objectively. Newcastle are not in good form in 2023. They've only won 1 league game, and really the outlier has been the semi-final 2 legs against a completely out of sorts Southampton in the dying days of the unmitigated disaster of the Nathan Jones era. So they have been slipping, and they just don't seem much of a threat. Having said all that, Alan Saint-Maximin turns Diogo Dalot inside out in 32 minutes, but for a great David De Gea save where he stood strong and tall, which is what Loris Karius was accused of not doing for United's second goal, then Newcastle could have taken the lead. And on the other side of it too, United go 2 up in very quick succession, and Dan Burn has a sitter 2 minutes before half time inside the 6-yard box with a header. For a man of that size, with heading capability, he has to score.
If Dan Burn has one function in life, it is to hit the target from there. Like, what are you doing?
And if that goes in, it gets suddenly quite interesting.
I mean, look, it'd be interesting to see if he'd hit the target and at least made the goalkeeper do some work. Make the goalkeeper do some work, but he couldn't do it. And that's the difference. It's Rashford versus Dan Burn. That's the difference in quality that we have at the moment at these teams. And I don't blame Newcastle for not being ready just yet. I think Isak might have been
a response to this will be interesting from Newcastle, and also the response if they end up not finishing inside the top 4 with the sudden resurgence in form from Tottenham, as to how much they do go invest, because obviously they've built this little storyline whereby it's just the genius of Eddie Howe that's got them into this position. They haven't spent any money at all. Well, it's just the brilliance. It's just the brilliance of their manager. So it doesn't matter that the Saudi money has come in. It's made no difference. This is all down to Eddie Howe. So do they now go, actually, we're going to go and spend 500 million next summer. We want to be in with the big boys. We're going to go and sign Declan Rice. Yeah. We're going to be the team that goes in there and offers more money than anybody else. Because, listen, it has fallen very flat. They've built their brilliant season so far on a rock-solid defence. They never changed their back 4. Nick Pope has been excellent in goal. But Almiron has completely lost his form. Wilson and Isak have both struggled for fitness ever since Christmas, and they were totally reliant on one of them to just score the goals. So when they don't have that, what do they have? Like, Saint-Maximin was exciting yesterday, but that's kind of what he is. He turns defenders inside out and he hopes they get booked, and he hopes maybe then he can try and have a proper run at them. But I thought he was fine after that.
A bit of a one-trick pony?
Absolutely, but I think actually what was more interesting about that was, again, the response from Ten Hag, where he didn't wait. At half-time, he took Dalot off and he brought on Wan-Bissaka and he said, I'm not going to take this risk. We're we're heading in the right direction. Let's not jeopardise this by getting him booked again and getting him sent off, and suddenly this is a very different game. So I think he's yet again shown that when it comes to making big decisions in cup finals, which isn't an easy thing to make that substitution at half-time, he's willing to go and do it. And like, this is, from where they were, I know it's a Carabao Cup final, but it's a step towards where they want to be. From where they were, not even after the first 2 games of the season, from where they were at the Etihad when Manchester City, that's only back in October. Like, that's what, 4 months ago?
Yeah, I think it's one of the all-time great starts to a managerial career when you think about it. We were making the point on Friday as well that if he lost this, Klopp lost a load of finals before he ended up getting the team to the point where they were ready. And I think there's probably a little bit of that with Eddie Howe, and I think that Amanda Staveley was kissing all the players afterwards.
Newcastle fans waving their flags crazily in the stoppage time when the game was done.
Yeah, but that's what I mean? They're singing the fields back and right.
Yeah, but it's
basically what they're doing there.
Well, they do know that they're like
going to be back. They will be back.
I don't know who was doing the co-com, but they were making the point that this is probably the last we're going to see of some of these Newcastle players. I mean,
yeah, that was
metaphorically, hopefully, and like they won't be part of the team that wins. Like there'll be Simon Mignolet is playing in all those cup finals, and Karius is playing in all those cup finals, and eventually they get the world class players. So those world class players are coming from Newcastle, and I don't feel any sympathy for Newcastle fans whatsoever. But for Manchester United, this trophy does feel different, and we've been making this point the whole way along that Louis van Gaal won a trophy and got sacked in the lift afterwards. Even when Mourinho was winning them, it never felt like he was building something.
Well, that's it. I mean, 2017, that's like Mourinho on paper did a good job at United 2.5 years because the first season they won the League Cup and the Europa League. But I remember thinking at that time when they beat Ajax to win the second trophy of that season that, it's great that you're winning trophies, but it doesn't feel right because they're not playing great football, and it very much feels like the dying embers of Mourinho's greatness, and he's proving to the world, I still got it.
Arnie Rone described it as a dead cat bounce, those couple of trophies for Mourinho at United.
The one thing that really struck me about the Mourinho era was that he was complaining about the transfers and not getting enough money, and like he was somehow divorced from the people making the decisions. With Ten Hag, there's none of that.
No, but Mourinho...
With Ten Hag, in fairness, they have backed Ten Hag at a level that is off the charts. Like, they after the results didn't go their way, they panic splurged and spent a load of money and looked like they'd overspent on a bunch of players who subsequently have turned out to be really, really, really good, really valuable.
They backed Mourinho too. Like, let's not forget. Like, Mourinho
not at the same level. I mean, Mourinho was always whining about not getting centre backs, and then it was like you look at the players he'd signed at centre back, and it was like, well, he spent 40 million on a guy who you won't pick. But anyway, there were players who he felt like he hadn't.
Yeah, there were players that he didn't get, but the money was still there. They still spent big. The thing with Mourinho, like he lived in a hotel for his whole time as United manager. Never felt like he was fully committed to actually doing it. He was just proving a point, I think, Mourinho at United. Whereas with Ten Hag, like Nathan mentioned there, the disastrous start to the season, even when they lose, they do it right because it's noteworthy. Like, they lost spectacularly in the Manchester derby at the Etihad. It's no kind of, stupid 3:00 on a Saturday defeat. It's like when they lose, it's big. And everything else.
You're now celebrating the humiliation of the defeat. At least when we lost that Manchester derby, it was the worst Manchester derby defeat there had ever been.
It was noteworthy.
The reason why this feels different is that Ten Hag is clearly in charge of everything, and he's
down to what they were wearing heading into the stadium yesterday. So Manchester United, you will not be surprised to hear, have a suit deal with Paul Smith suits, which I'm sure Paul Smith has spent a lot of money to make sure that the Manchester United players, on the rare occasions they get to a cup final, are wearing his beautifully tailored suit as they walk into the stadium, and they get those shots of them having the chat and taking the photos on the pitch. Eric Ten Hag said, "Not for me, pal. It's going to take us 10 minutes to change out of those suits. That's just wasting our time. My players are not going to wear those suits. They're going to wear their tracksuits, and they're going to be ready to go when they get to the stadium." And obviously Manchester United said, "Well, that's not possible. We've signed all this money for this. Is the one. Like, they don't wear a suit any other time. They're going to wear the suit today." And Ten Hag put the foot down and said, "No, they're going to wear the tracksuit," and he got his way.
Well, this stuff can often feel like it's minor, but you can guarantee that there's an entire commercial department who are like feverishly checking with the lawyers to find some justification to win the argument with him, and he just wins the argument. Do you know, it's like it shouldn't be important, but it is important.
A strong stance about suits in a cup final. We've been there before with a Manchester United manager. 1996 FA Cup final, when Fergie saw the white suits of Liverpool. 1-0, he said, apparently. He was right, eventually. But Ten Hag is...
He said apparently.
Yeah.
Like, this is...
Well, that's what he said himself in an interview.
There's no greater man for, right
of course.
Right place.
He knows.
That's a remarkable re-emergence of Alex Ferguson, who has made sure he's front and centre of this entire...
Lads, this has been the case. This has been the case since 2013. Well, it absolutely has.
Really?
He's been very prominent.
Why don't they just give him an office? It worked really well for former Scottish genius managers to hang around the training ground.
I think you're looking too much into that. He's just been... Yeah, I think so personally. I think he's been around a lot.
We're going to talk to Andy Mitten about what happens next, because United are, it feels, in a position to build, and Ten Hag has done what all top class managers do, and has based his team around a couple of real top quality elite players, and Casemiro and Varane is getting the best out of them, has raised players above their level, whether that's Rashford or Shaw.
Yeah,
even Fred. Looking at Fred yesterday, you're going, this guy was a laughingstock 6 months ago because he was stuck in the midfield alongside McTominay, who were being completely overrun. But actually, Casemiro, he's sort of like what Joel Matip is at Liverpool alongside Van Dijk. Like,
that's right.
An average player who's suddenly been elevated by someone brilliant alongside him. The one I'm wondering about Manchester United and their progress forward is Bruno Fernandes and what they do with Bruno Fernandes, who has been, I think, the one disappointment of the Ten Hag era. I thought he was bang average again yesterday, aside from his usual bitching and moaning throughout the match at every little decision that goes against him. I thought he contributed very, very little. And that's an area, if you're going to spend a lot of money, if you're going after a Jude Bellingham or one of the top quality midfielders, maybe he's the guy who's suddenly sweating for his position.
Possibly. I think he's still recovering from the Cristiano Ronaldo era, Fernandes, where he was very much put back in his box by his compatriot, and now he's trying to get back. And I do think it's a bit of the Sancho thing, where everyone else is playing so well, and the fact that he's not is probably enhancing the fact that, oh my God, I'm not at the level that even Fred is. Like Fred under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer occasionally had worldy games, but he can never back it up, whereas Ten Hag's got that out of him. One thing as well to note, Raphael Varane did an interview with Jonathan Northcroft for the Sunday Times, and he was talking about how much he's enjoying it at United. And one thing that he decided to do at the very start of the season, he missed those first two games against Brighton and Brentford, and he took Lisandro Martinez aside and he says, look, we have to change the mentality around defending. So every time we make a great clearance or a block or just good defending, we should celebrate that. And you actually see that now every time.
Waterford hurling style.
Yesterday,
bit of John Milan.
Yesterday, Casemiro jockeyed the ball out of play when Joelinton took him on, and he gave a bit of that to the fans. And then behind him, you could see Varane and Martinez joining in, and that triangle has really changed the mentality of those players.
When that happened, Gary Neville was like, "Oh, I wasn't sure about the contract, but now give him all the money in the world." And it's like he's literally just like G'd the crowd up. I understand that it's like emblematic of he's allowed to do that because he's such a good footballer, but it was a little bit, that's just cool.
Don't mind that, because he said to Solskjaer, where do you want your statue after that PSG game in March 2019? So don't mind that. He's getting carried away.
Very quickly, I'm guessing, besides Ireland, that we'll have Man United Love Fest. They're back and all that. Morning, boys, says Paul McGee. I mean, are they not back?
I mean, how could we not mark this?
Are they not back?
It depends what back means.
Back means
they are
competing for the Champions League.
League. They are back. Sorry, they're back competing for the Champions League. They're back competing for the title. They're back as a relevant force. It's that next step as to what do Manchester City bring over the next 2 or 3 years. It's whether Ten Hag can get to the next level. And maybe Qatar answers all that.
No, I once they're in the Champions League next season, which we expect them to be, they immediately become potential winners of the competition, because we've seen teams who aren't very good reach semi-finals and finals in recent years. You saw a mediocre Spurs team under Pochettino, who played very well that season in the Champions League, but were shocking in the league that year, reach the final, and who knows if Harry Kane had been fit, what might have happened. So I think that this is them back to relevance, assuming they finish in the top four. And I actually think they should really be using this as a springboard to go on a run and win 6, 7, 8, 9 games over the next month and a half, 2 months, and really put it up to Manchester City, who are just a little bit flaky at the minute.
I enjoyed Roy Keane saying to Ten Hag afterwards, you should resign after that dance you did with Anthony and Lisandro Martinez. And Ten Hag says, absolutely not, I'll do it again. We have history, the three of us. Not backing down to Roy.
Keane's bit is the Brazilians aren't allowed to dance unless they're my Brazilians, and then it's like, anyway.
Keane was the comic foil yesterday on Sky Sports, which I found interesting. A new characteristic.
Chapper's doing the Carabao Cup. I hadn't been watching the pre and post match at any point, so that was news to me. And I mean, he's excellent.
And Chapper does all the Carabao Cup.
That's what I was saying, yeah. But only the Carabao Cup.
Only the Carabao Cup, yeah.
It's a random enough foul.
It's all money.
Well, I'm a fan of Chappers,
Yeah, he's good. Great.
Owen O'Connor says, does Ger still believe Newcastle will finish above Man United in the league? Does he owe Colm an apology? I think you'll remember this was pre-Casemiro, pre-Anthony, pre the investment, and they still had Cristiano on the team. So that team was not finishing anywhere.
No.
But no. Things changed at the time. At the end of last season, they changed their manager.
I would love an apology.
Absolutely not. I was correct. The Manchester United board are obviously on. I mean, this is a realistic possibility here. How is this going to happen? Let's change the manager.
Apology. It's a form of it anyway.
If you gave me the choice of Newbridge or Nowhere this morning, I'd choose Nowhere. Shocking stuff. Put them in the red, says Brian Dillon. And somebody else was like, I was at the Kildare game in Newbridge yesterday. Who's this? Andy Jennings. Good Lord, they were shocking. No idea if it's the management or they just don't have the players. A bit of both, I think. Well, we'll talk about this with Anthony Moyles a little bit later on, but they haven't yet made the red because there's still an outside chance that they won't be playing in the Tailteann Cup this year. Still a chance. Got to beat Louth in RD next Sunday.
Ger, bit of silverware, Tailteann Cup. Be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, that we were
open top parade.
We were talking about the
Brady Family Ham sponsoring
Springboard.
Beautiful.
Get Paul Mescal to get
do a
on board
Michael
the bus.
Sheen style pre-match speech. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, I think maybe you could go out there and give your best.
Wow, he's an actor. I think he could up his game if it was required.
He could fake it, but I mean,
Literally his gig.
Yeah, but his gig is also very specific type of like disassociated, slightly uncertain. Not exactly what Kildare football need at the moment, you know?
I think this lack of self-belief in yourself is the problem for Kildare. Like, you've got one of the great Irish actors of the moment.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you can't do much aside from just have the head down and talk a little bit like this. Like, celebrate this man. You should be proud of him.
Oh, we are.
Kildare's finest.
We are.
I know Joey let you down and he didn't develop on the potential he thought he had, but there's no reason that Paul Mescal will do the same.
You know what you both can be proud of? Ireland's win in Italy.
Is that what else is agreeing? Move on there, he's saying.
Ireland. Did you hear Ireland's call for the game?
Yeah.
Ireland together. Now, in fairness, terrible song at the best of times, so it's hard to make a mess of it. But they've... I thought there was just a sound tech issue at first. It's like, but the sound is miles off here. But the Irish players just decide we're going to roll on through. We're going to show the Italians they cannot slow down our anthem. But they did.
Well, it worked. Ireland flew out of the traps. Thought they had a try after 1 minute 25 seconds when Lowe just lost control. And then 45 seconds later they did have a try.
This was a great game, wasn't it? Italians more than little pat in the head for them. The Italians more than played their part in the quality of this game, because I thought when Ireland went over for that very early try, it was going to be a bit of a whooping, and they'd bonus points secured after 35 minutes. Did they ever look like not winning the game? Not quite sure. The difference between this and the first two matches is it felt against both Wales and France that when they had their period of dominance, Ireland defensively were exceptional. That you sort of felt a Wales score or a France score was coming, and it never quite happened. Whereas Italy, every time they went forward, there were some gaping holes, which is the one question mark coming out of this. A couple of players didn't do their chances a world of good.
Well,
like Bundyaki, 5 missed tackles, but Bundyaki hasn't played any rugby.
Yeah.
Like, that's the problem for Bundy here. You get yourself sent off, you fall out with the coaching team, and suddenly you're not playing any.
Aki was central to the 4 of Ireland's tries, and at the same time they seemed to target him and attack Italy and outside centre because his defensive skills left a lot to be desired. Like Canone was just ripping through him in the first 20 minutes, number 8. You
got to remember, Ireland are missing 4 of their 5 most important players.
This
happens at if this happens at a World Cup, if you're missing if you're missing Sexton, Furlong, Ringrose, Henshaw, add in Gibson, Park and Byrne. If that happens in a World Cup, Ireland are getting knocked out of the World Cup.
Well, that's
2015 all over again.
It is exactly what happened in 2015. However, this was just the Italy game. Like, those players might not have played. More than likely, they wouldn't have played. They would have made changes to the Italy game. If you look back, like, this guy played in the Italy game. Like, okay, and then we never really saw from them again. So we have traditionally made that number of changes. So we should have expected something akin to this performance. And the missing players, I don't think, would have played. I don't think they were putting Sexton out into that game if Sexton was fully fit. It's funny how everybody is fully fit. That's what the post-match is like. Oh yeah, they're all fit. They're training away. Tyke's training away there. He'll be ready to go, with the exception of Byrne.
Yeah.
But those players who were unavailable for that are all like. I think if that was a World Cup quarter final, Gary Ringrose is playing.
Yeah.
You know, like he was there in his tracksuit. He was there in the stadium. I think all those players are going to play against Scotland. But
I mean, Nathan, you said it looked like Ireland were always going to win, but geez, that's 12 minutes to go, 27-20. Juan Ignacio Brex has the ball.
Oh my God,
he has 3 players on his outside and he kicks it.
yeah, not a great.
What's he doing?
Not a great decision. Not like I think there's actually loads of stuff to talk about. On ITV they were talking about James Ryan's decision not to take the points when the gap was 7. We kick to the corner and then the line out goes astray, and you're like, so we already had our bonus point. We weren't going to get any more bonus points stuff, and yeah, I think we just didn't play a little bit of cup rugby in that second half, which is again just a captaincy. You've got to learn that and you've got to go through that. So I think, James Ryan's captaincy.
Do you think that was James Ryan or was that premeditated? Because I don't know if you saw the clip of Andy Farrell coming onto the side of the pitch on the 80th minute and shouting at Conor Murray, if we get the ball back,
keep playing.
Yeah. so don't kick it out, even though the game is won. So Ireland are trying to put themselves in scenarios of keeping the ball in play as much as they possibly can. I know what you're saying. You got to win the game first and foremost, as well as you're trying to learn some things along the way, but that they're confident enough that they're going to win the game, that actually we're going to test ourselves in these scenarios.
Yeah, I think maybe fair enough, although when we are 7 points up against France in a World Cup match, I would like them to just kick that ball over, and because we'll get the ball back, take the game to 2 scorers, and that's also a different type of pressure. I think it's interesting to very quickly look at the player ratings. So the Star have Bundy Aki at 7, Ross Byrne at 8, Craig Casey at 8, Jack Cohn at 7. The Irish Times, not going to make happy reading.
Paper of record.
John O'Sullivan in the Irish Times has James Lowe at 6, Stuart McCluskey at 6, Bundy Aki at 6, Ross Byrne at 6, Craig Casey at 5. 5 out of 10 is 50%.
Those first 4 did not have the same performance.
The Irish Times are trying to turn into L'Equipe here.
Yeah, they did not have the same performance. They're not all 6.
James Lowe got a 9 in the Star, I'm fairly sure.
James Lowe, Mac Hansen gets a 9. James Lowe got a 9. Touched off for man of the match. And Menace been given time and space and saved a try with a brilliant read and tackle at one point.
No tries himself, bookended the match.
His performance mirrored that of Ireland, says the Irish Times. Good in parts, kicking and ability to beat defenders, but he gambled several times in defence, not always successfully. Should have scored a couple of tries. Craig Casey gets a 5.
That's hard. Craig Casey was grand.
Fine,
Casey and Byrne were grand. Like, they didn't massively stand out. Maybe they weren't being asked to stand out. It was go in, do a solid job, get the win, move on with our lives. Don't stink the joint out so that we're having a debate for the next 2 weeks about whether we should bring Joey Carberry back in.
Well, Ross Byrne followed Ron O'Gara's advice was don't try and stand out, just do your thing. Do your stuff, as John Giles would say to you, Nathan, of a Thursday.
Angela Bassett.
Yes.
Jack Conan says 5. 5 out of 10 for Jack Conan. He tried to get in.
The one who's in a bit of trouble now.
He tried to get in some of his trademark surges, but without the footwork, he was met by aggressive Italian tackling on the gain line and only managed to ride that initial contact on a couple of occasions.
The 2 question marks.
I can't find player ratings. I can't find player ratings for anybody else.
Send in your player ratings, journalists of Ireland, and we'll read them out. So Aki, as you say, ball in hand, is doing wondrous things. Brilliant. But they're targeting him. Like, does he get back in the Connacht side after this? Does he have another 3 months of not playing any rugby? Is he in a position heading into the warm-up games where they're going, let's try Jamie Osborne and his position for the world? It feels very hard to see that scenario. Like Jack Conan, I know the Munster fans were up in arms last week. What about our boy? Yeah, but like, Conan's a line, but he comes in, doesn't make a massive impact in a hotly contested part of the pitch. Is his position in the squad now under?
I think he suffered when Darius switched over back to 8 and was probably better than him in that little cameo than Conan was beforehand. But again, Conan probably tried to go out of his way to impress so much because Darius has been exceptional in that position, and he ain't displacing Darius.
No one's displacing Darius, really. I think that's the point. But we do need strength and depth. And it's is Conan going to get in ahead of O'Mahony? Probably not, but he'll certainly be on the bench and there'll be an opportunity for him. They've given O'Mahony contract all the way through to the end of the following season, so it's not like one of those Keith Earls contracts to the end of the World Cup. They're sticking with O'Mahony. He's their man at the moment, and we know the team. It'll be interesting. Finlay Bealham obviously went off injured, which is probably an automatic return straight away for Tyke Furlong anyway. And probably Furlong they were going to start because they can get as many minutes as him as they possibly can. So we wait to see what the injury is to Bealham. But I don't know. It was kind of perfect in that you get your bonus points. Everybody's happy. There's plenty for Italy to feel good about. They stressed us in areas that we'll be like, okay, well, we need to fix that and move on.
Well, Paolo Garbisi made a huge difference to them. They looked genuinely really threatening, but I thought Ireland's attacking play was fantastic. I thought the quickness of the passing in the first half, particularly to create all those tries, especially out wide, was just brilliant. But I think the Aki storyline for me is the most interesting from this. Like Nathan was saying, does he go back into the Connacht side? I think he has to.
I think you're ringing Connacht and you're saying he plays every minute that we want him to play.
I think you're Andy Friend going, I'm sailing off in the sunset in 3 months. I'll do whatever the hell I want there.
No, but
he's such a good option to have, Aki, when he's playing well. But then he just gives a try to Pierre Bruno in the end of the first half with a way overly ambitious pass. But the over the ambition came from the fact that he was setting up so much good play in the first half. I also enjoyed at the end of the match when Aki castigated himself. Stupid Bundy, stupid, as he walked away. He's high standards for himself because he played so well at times and then was horrendous at other players.
I think it's just they can't play together. That was the main thing coming out, is that 10, 12 and 13, there's not enough pace. If you've got the three of them all in the team at the same time, you need to look at something different. So we'll come back to all this with Quinlan in about 5 minutes time. Moving on.
In the amber, France.
We put France in the amber really, because amber is very difficult to put somebody in. I mean, they got a bonus point in the last moment. The game was done and dusted, you would have said, after 10 minutes, until their stupid ill discipline cost them a red card. And that's the one thing that would make you think that perhaps there's just still a little bit of French France about this France team. Like, there's still a little bit of which French side are going to show up, which they completely obliterated by putting the kids in the team 4 years ago, giving them all this time to build up to it, discovering that they have the best player in the world at number 9, and massive strength in depth. They have, like every rugby team, got players from all around the world who are physical specimens that are maybe not necessarily French by birth, and we do the same thing. So that's just the way the game works. But they looked like they had everything ready, and now just as the moment comes, it looks a little bit like you could get at this French team.
You're feeling a full-on French crisis is coming in the weeks leading up to the World Cup?
Well, I think that there's a possibility that France blows a game they should win.
They're playing New Zealand in the opening game of the tournament. They get whipped in that. Suddenly it is a full... Like
Joe Schmidt's New Zealand. Do you think Joe Schmidt's watching that game going, oh, this is terrible, France are going to hockey us? He's looking at that going, wow, look at what Scotland are doing to you lads. Like...
As hot and cold as France were in that game and have been for the 3 matches so far, did they not come up against the red hot Finn Russell? Like,
who also threw them
yeah, but when he was again a bit like he was
6.
kind of Aki plus, like, because
look, Finn Russell,
I understand the intercept pass for the try, but still, geez, when he was on form, his kicking.
What are we going to do
His
with Finn
passing.
Russell next time out? It's obviously fortnight away, but yeah, Finn Russell, the challenge of Finn Russell is going to be very, very important for us next time out, and it's going to be
and at the World Cup,
interesting to see what to do. Yeah, I mean, if the draw was being made for the World Cup now, Scotland would be like seeded much higher than they are.
Yeah, well, even the dynamic of how the games play out. So Ireland have their first 2 matches, then they play France, and then we were looking and going, well, then there's a week off. Then you've got a 2-week break before Scotland, so you're bringing a few lads back in before we head into the knockout stages. Now you're thinking, God damn it.
We
need full strength of Scotland.
Well, there's a
week,
possibility Scotland...
7 days before World Cup quarter-final.
Is it possible Scotland beat the Springboks? It really is, France is a very well organised country with the TGV where you can basically get across it. They could have just said, you're going to have your base in Marseille, you're going to have your base in Bordeaux, you're going to have your base in Paris, you're going to have your base in Toulouse, and we'll tell you, like, now, or we'll tell you in the summer who's in your group. It would have been really easy to organise this from a logistical perspective. Apparently we don't still have our hotels all booked because the hotels that have been offered us are shite. Like, that's how crap this organisation in the French World Cup is. Remember, this is the World Cup that we should be hosting.
Where are we staying? But we should stay in that nice palace in Versailles where we stayed during Euro 2016.
Hey, you should
That's the Trianon Palace. Beautiful place.
No.
Well, we didn't stay in the palace. We stayed in an apartment.
You did make it sound like we stayed in the palace.
Sorry. The Irish players stayed in the palace. We weren't allowed to near the palace. We stayed in a 2-bedroom apartment where to get to the toilet you had to walk over Adrian Barry's bed. So it wasn't quite the same level of glamour.
What an intro to a story.
And where our studio was outside the other bedroom door, so it wasn't. But listen, hey, we got on with it. We took one for the team.
So just before we move on from the rugby for now, can someone out there answer me, why do half of the teams in this year's Six Nations have their names in the back of their jerseys and the other half don't? So Scotland, England and Italy have the names of the players in the back. The rest don't. Is this why was it not a collective decision by the Six Nations to let's all do it or none of us do it? I personally think it's a good addition.
Is it something to do with Netflix and Alikadoo and that kind of thing? I don't know. They're also not very well put on their jerseys. They're
looks
like
a bit amateurish.
The
font
tiny little,
isn't great.
It's like if the GA decided to finally put names there to be like, can I just get the magnifying glass in there? Which of the brothers is that?
It's like if your Sunday League team decided to do it for their big cup final of the year. But I like the idea of it. I mean, like, you're thinking if you have a player associated with a number, sales increase. It's a no-brainer. You have another all-American sports do it, football does it. I think it's something that rugby could incorporate. But I think it's strange that half do and half don't.
Yeah.
Either all do it or don't do it.
Let's get to the red. Tyrone. let me tell you a couple of things about Tyrone.
No, just tell us something about Mayo. Come on.
It's hard to believe what has happened to Tyrone in such a short space of time. They had a disastrous championship last year, but in the county, the players and management were largely given a free pass. That was unusual for Tyrone, where supporters can often go in hard on the team, but maybe there was a feeling they pulled off a huge All-Ireland against the Oz in 2021. Give them a bit of slack. I thought the players would go back to their clubs and then come back re-energised for this season. No sign of that so far. I do not remember ever seeing a Tyrone team so disorganised and unstructured in defence. This isn't Tyrone. This isn't the way we are as a county.
Ooh, who's that?
Words of Sean Kavanagh.
Sean Kavanagh.
Not holding back.
I mean, they got a free pass because they were All-Ireland champions. You know, and they've actually delivered the Holy Grail at a time when this Dublin and Kerry teams were still around. Like, maybe it's the last sting of the Dublin team, but they were still there. And that Kerry team, it turns out, are on the verge of being absolutely fantastic. So
felt a bit shambolic on Saturday night against Mayo. Their defeats are bad defeats at the moment. Even you go back to the championship last year, the defeats to Derry and Armagh, they don't show anything of the fight of All-Ireland champions at all. And you look at them, and listen, this is a side who suffered the ultimate humiliation against Kerry the year they went on to win the All-Ireland. So they've been there. They know how to set themselves on the road to return. But yeah, there's no spark to them whatsoever. You know, conceding 4 goals to Mayo. They hadn't lost in Castlebar in 30 years. And I'm not sure if that stat is particularly relevant in too many ways, but 4 goals against Mayo, 3 goals against Roscommon, scrapping to stay in Division 1. Yeah, and Sean Kavanagh absolutely ripping you to pieces in the paper this morning.
Okay, we'll come back to this a little bit later on with Moyles, but come on, give us a little bit. You're itching here to tell us the truth. The truth about that game is that we've seen the All-Ireland champions in action. Hand out Sam Maguire now. The curse is over.
I'm not getting quoted in any of this, so it can come back to bite me in the ass. I think Mayo have been good. Have been very good. They're probably playing with the personality of their manager, and that there's a freedom to what they're doing, and sort of a joy, and willing to express their true footballing self. But they got Tyrone on a very bad day. They got Kerry on a very bad day.
Coincidentally,
and
everybody has a bad day against Mayo.
We're able to take full advantage of that.
But I mean, look,
there's
all joking aside, you must be pretty excited about what you're seeing.
I think I'm excited because there's always a fear that Mayo are going to go over a cliff edge at some stage, and it turns out that's not happening. So, like,
but they always do go over a
10
cliff
years.
edge is the problem.
Well,
at some point there's like a missed penalty in an All-Ireland
when
final,
you look
or
at
2 own goals or
like,
whatever.
Lee Keegan retires, Oisin Mullen is gone, and that comes off the back of half a dozen of their greatest ever players stepping away over the last couple of years, and you think, well, this is the end of the golden generation. But then a new crop of players come through, and you'd have to assume that the general standard of strength and conditioning and of quality that's needed to get into that squad over the last decade means that the levels are still very, very high and are going to be better than most.
Well, the goals they scored.
Well, the goals, the goal from Enda Hession. Like, have you seen a goal like that from a player wearing number 4? Like, this guy's a cornerback.
1-2.
This guy's a cornerback. It was ridiculous. Aidan O'Shea is having his best league campaign in a long, long time. Like, the quality of his pass. Ger Connolly had made that pass. For James Carr. Spin and this, like, it's just a thing of beauty. They're scoring a lot of goals, and there's probably a bit more experience in some of these players. Like Enda Hession, played in the All-Ireland final. He played the second half, full second half in 2021. Played almost all the game against Dublin in the semi-final. So while some of these names are quite new, they do have a bit of experience in the bank. Tommy Conroy's back, came off the bench, first time in a year. Obviously, he was huge in that semi-final win against Dublin back in 21. 12 different scorers. So there's a lot going on. They're probably going to find themselves in a league final, whether they like it or not. Then they're out again against Roscommon. Look, we just don't know with the way the season is set up this year as to how it's all going to work out. And, did Kevin McStay go in and go, I need to rejuvenate this group. We want to start well. I know this is a county that likes a bit of hype, likes a bit of momentum, right, and that we just become this unstoppable thing until it suddenly comes to a grinding halt in a round-robin series.
Sure, look, it's one of these years you're going to get over the line. It may as well be this year. Everybody's a believer. Last one's Chelsea. We're not doing any significant time here in Chelsea, but like, what is there to say? Just sack them and be done with it. I thought like they've got to ride this out, but they can't now.
It's becoming increasingly impossible to defend Graham Potter and keep him in a job. I still think it's an impossible job where he is at the moment, but no wins in 6, 3 goals in 10 matches.
Yeah, one shot on target by the 70th minute. Classic.
He was very, very honest, obviously, in his pre-match press conference. Arguably too honest for a manager in that position, where people don't appreciate, being told how hard the gig is. Where he spoke about, his family receiving death threats and the struggles he was having with his mental health, trying to deal with all the pressure he was under. But the results just aren't good enough. I still the problem with the goals is a problem that was there at Brighton. You look at Brighton the last couple of years, like Neil Maupay was their top scorer. He didn't hit double figures in either season. They played a very nice brand of football, but even at Brighton we would say they're not getting the results that they should because they're not scoring enough goals. Now, they don't have a striker. They're still playing with Kai Havertz up front.
Well, it's his choice to keep
They've got
Aubameyang out.
Well, Aubameyang's shite. You keep talking about him.
absolutely brutal.
He's terrible.
He's there. He's available.
But he's
number
shite.
nine.
He's been terrible for 4 seasons. They shouldn't play
have
him.
nobody to score a goal.
But it doesn't matter. You can't go to him because that's like
nobody.
Okay, so the answer to that is to pick the toxic player who's been terrible for literally 3.5 years. That's not an answer. That's bringing him off the bench.
He had his half a season at Barcelona, but when he's played this year, he has been
he's been awful.
Now, maybe there's a different way he has to look at it. When you have João Felix, Raheem Sterling, Mudryk has come in, and aside from the little cameo in his debut against Liverpool, hasn't done a huge amount. But maybe you have to find a way of getting one of them to score some goals, because it doesn't look like Havertz is ever going to be the answer. Probably not helped with what's going on with Mason Mount, who's fallen off a cliff edge since the World Cup as well, is out of contract in the summer. But there are bits in every game where you look at them and go, they're starting to get this together. Defensively and in midfield, they actually are starting to look like a decent
it was
side,
classic
but then
Potter.
it just breaks down in the final third. And clearly, if this was the Abramovich era, he's not even here. He's gone.
Enzo Fernandez looks very good. João Felix looks good, but they don't look like a goal scoring threat at all. They've won one away game since the last time they won away was October 16th, Villa Park. All right, he's done.
Does that even count?
No. 11 minutes past 8 this morning. That is this week's episode of the Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Up next, Alan Quinlan in the studio. First, here's Grand Slam winner Alison Miller talking about Ireland's win in Rome alongside Joe Malloy yesterday.
It is very encouraging from an Irish point of view that there's now a lot of tape for other teams to study, and they're still not managing to stem the flow. And Andy Farrell, it's becoming his regular point after games. God, we could have scored a lot more tries, which again shows the creativity that's flowing through the side.
Yeah, obviously James Lowe's opportunity, Bundy Aki's opportunity in 22, and we weren't clinical enough to finish our examples. There was 5 or 6, I think, scenarios where he could have scored. So it just shows that we're creating those opportunities and they're there, but we just got to finish them now. But I think there was some great tries scored, and I think the subs that came on when they came on yesterday, like Omani, Baird, Sheen, they made a huge difference. And Conor Murray looked great. He looked back to his best. And I think with this Andy Farrell team, they talk a lot about being themselves on the pitch, and I know that they're all saying that and they're enjoying camp and they're loving playing rugby, but I think that's probably fairly obvious when you have Conor Murray come off the bench and he has the confidence to snipe at the ruck like he used to and get that offload away to Hansen, who's brilliantly trailing, behind the ruck, just hiding in there looking for an opportunity. Andy Farrell talks about his wingers being untidy and wanting to come off their wings, get involved, look for work, and Hansen did that really well. And I thought Hansen's subtlety of hands yesterday was very, very good, especially for Keenan's try. He was good, and I just think these things are really important for this Irish team.
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Off the Ball Daily.
A home for your favourite podcasts from Off the Ball. The performance rankings, a slight tangent, the crappy quiz, and you had to be there.
You have to be there, but I wish I wasn't there.
Subscribe to the Off the Ball Daily podcast feed right now.
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, 14 minutes past 8. Alan Quinlan is with us this morning. Alan, another win for Ireland, and we're being picky, as we should be, I suppose. We, best team in the world. So you got to pick the nits from a performance like that. But all in all, I think Andy Farrell's going to be absolutely delighted.
Yeah, he is. I think obviously you could look at it. It been really scary there, probably around in the mid 60s. I think it was 63 third or fourth minute where, you know, Ross Byrne has to kick a penalty to stretch it out to 7. It was 24-20. But overall, what didn't surprise me in any way that the Italians played the way they played. I said it last week, and it wasn't just kind of giving it lip service. I think, you know, they're improved dramatically. I think their attack is so much better. Some very dangerous players, and even their back row is there's a great balance to that. And they're 3 brilliant players: Canone, Negri, and Lamaro, the captain. So they have a good side, you know, and a skillful side as well. So, and they proved that it wasn't a fluke. The evidence is there with them beating Wales last year, beating Australia in November, the performance against France in the first game. So it's not as if this has just been a fluke. We've seen this coming a little bit.
And they came back from an early try from us as well. There wasn't a sense, oh, that's it, it's game over. Whereas in previous years, we would have scored to try that early and like, okay, this game is going to...
You kick on a little bit, and it's always a tougher game. It always has been, because you're expected to win handsomely, and if you don't, then it's seen as disappointing. I think people realise that this is different, and that they're a very attack-minded side. They don't just bring the kind of passion and gusto and all that stuff. They now can attack, and you saw the way they were moving the ball in their back line, and Garbisi being back helped them as well. So I think bar the period when it was 24-20, and then even when it was 27-20, they had a brilliant chance in the 68th minute if they put it through the hands. Ignacio Brex did this crazy crossfield kick.
Yeah. Didn't make any sense.
Yeah. The second row, Rutza, if it bounces up and he scores, well, then it's fine. But he was fuming that it wasn't put through the hands. They had Ireland stretched there a little bit. So I think when Andy Farr looks back, very much relieved and happy. I think when Mac Hansen scores a try nearly, you know, to give him a bit of comfort, I think they're able to relax a small bit. But I didn't sense any sort of panic in the Irish side either when it was quite close, which was a good sign. And realistically, I think when Bruno gets the intercept just before half time, that gives them a real kind of sense of this is different now, and they get in at half time and they're only a score behind. So a couple of things obviously Ireland would look at and would be like to be much better at. They missed 24 tackles, but you know, there's a number of players missing. You're 9, 10, 12, 13 are 4 guys that are...
Turns out they're important.
Yeah, the ones that are not there are very important, but that's valuable experience for them. And maybe the Gary Ringrose situation, he's now become very dependable, particularly defensively.
Yeah. What's the depth chart now, like in Andy Farrell's head? Because we haven't had a look at Osborne. This might have been an opportunity for them. They sent him away. Hume's form it appears nowhere near the Ireland selection, where there was a clamour to get him into the team, and then injury robbed him of an opportunity. And
the injury for James Hume last summer didn't help, and it took him a bit of time to come back. Then Ulster, his team are struggling, so you can't rule James Hume out from being a contender to be a 13. Bundy Aki has very little rugby played, and that showed a little bit on Saturday.
Yeah.
And you can't, like, I know what this is like. Sometimes it's really difficult when you're out. The more matches you play, the sharper everything becomes. And then because you're moved out to a 13 slot, which is so much more difficult to defend there, you know, he looked like he was blowing at times, and that's fully understandable. Even though then you give Bundy Aki with the ball, comes up with some big moments and some really great carries, and for the James Ryan try, he makes that really, you know what I mean? Hugo Keenan's he's involved as well with the pass, lovely pass to Van der Fleer. So you know, there's a few issues there that need to be addressed, and again, it's a great learning curve that you know they can look at. Anton Frisch, and I've said this, is probably the most like for like at the moment. But he hasn't been in the setup and the system, so maybe it's too late now. I don't know. You
certainly be called.
You couldn't say it's too late that a guy can come into. He's a very good player, Anton Frisch.
Yeah, you'd be calling him into all the squads from now on to see.
Well, I would think so. Yeah. Well, I think they're very much aware. He was on that Emerging Ireland tour, but I tell you, if you watch Anton Frisch playing for Munster and even in Europe, superb player, some unbelievable moments, and he's very much like Ringrose in the way he runs and the evasion and the pace that he has. He's a very physical player as well. Robbie Henshaw can play 13 for sure, and he would be a better 13 than Bundy. Bundy is a outstanding 12.
Yeah.
Who had to play in that position.
I was just looking it up there. Sorry, Ulster had Luke Marshall at 13 in their win against Sharks. So I don't know if he was injured at the moment again, but he wasn't.
Yeah, I think he is injured again, James Hume.
Does Aki need to sort out whatever the situation at Connacht is between now and the end of the season, or does it matter because they'll have 3 warm-up games before the World Cup?
I would imagine so, Nathan. I think for everyone's interests, I think whatever situation that was there, disagreement or misunderstanding, or if maybe there was none, maybe it was just a form thing or whatever, you would like to, I'm sure Connacht fans would like to have it put to bed and get some sort of a feel about what the plan is going forward, because he is a brilliant player. He's a game changer at the top level when he's fit, healthy and well.
They obviously love him.
We're very lucky to have him.
They obviously love him because they put him in the squad and on the team, on the bench, even when he wasn't playing for Connacht. So they've obviously made that work.
Yeah, and you make a point about Jamie Osborne. I think Andy Farrell's problem here was Bundy Aki needing game time and Stuart McCluskey getting a kind of a deserving shot or run at playing on the top team in these big games. He got it in November and got injured in the first one. So that's probably what went against Jamie Osborne. But you don't have to play for Ireland to suddenly go and play at a World Cup. There's certain guys that might just go into the team and at the World Cup. Ideally, you would like that experience, but it's not a necessity that you have had to have played. If you're a very good player and you've been involved in squads, I think the transition is easier. So I don't know if Anton Frisch was up training with Ireland or one of the players called in to train. I didn't hear that he was, but right. I would imagine he will be over the summer period on an extended squad because he's too good a player not to look at him anyway. And I know, France have been trying to get him to go back.
Yeah.
But Gary, it just goes to show how important and how much of a player Gary Ringrose is, how good he is.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly difficult position, and Dricko always said that. I'm sure you'll ask him later in the week. It's probably one of the hardest positions. Ask Dennis Leamy about it. He was moved at one stage, around 2005-06 season. Around that time, we had Axel, myself and Jim Williams in the back row, and then you had Dennis Leamy and David Wallace, and you're thinking, how do I get Dennis Leamy and David Wallace on the field as well? Well, we put Wally on the wing and we put Leamy as a 13. And that happened in a few games, and... In
the middle of a game? Or
No, they started league games, yeah.
Hey, right.
Yeah, Wally was on the wing at one stage, and it was... he was so fast, but there's more to it than just being fast. Dennis Leamy, I remember being a 13, and I can't remember who we played. Maybe it was the Scarlets down in Cork, and just going... Someone ran this hard line, and Dennis was kind of like... What's after happening here? And I remember talking to him after the game, and he's going, Jesus, I'm no more of that spot. It's, you don't know where fellas are coming at, whether they go in, out, go straight up, hard on someone. So it's a very difficult position to train, to defend. And, obviously Gary Ringrose does it brilliantly, and he's grown so much and he's so consistent.
It is funny how in games like this where someone isn't there, you miss them more. There's been a mixed response to Casey and Byrne. What's your assessment? 48
Very
hours
valuable for them, and it was a little bit disjointed at times and chaotic, and then Italy were good. So I think they played well, but not brilliant. They didn't have this situation where everybody's going, wow, what a performance. But I think they both played well and be very valuable for them. Rossburn, a few weeks ago, we were all talking about how brilliant it was that he can come on for 30 minutes and do really well in a big situation against France when it was a crucial period of the game and stuff. So they both did well. I would like to see Rossburn kicking game out of hand. Going for at one stage for the Italian try, the first one, I think it was a poor clearance from Rossburn out of his own 22. Got no distance on the ball for a big fella, and it was an end-over-end kick. Italy launched an attack and eventually a score in the corner. So James Lowe is a great asset to have because he can go with that massive distance down the field. And essentially in a World Cup, it's cup rugby sometimes. And to have that ability to kick really, really long, like Ben Healy, like his ability to just spiral it from 122 to the other and find grass. And I think, so Ross Byrne did well. I think there's obviously still the zip and the way Sexton can attack the line is still at a different level.
That's the thing, isn't it? That like if our benchmark is Sexton, we're never going to get to the benchmark. What we need is somebody who is 7/10 of Sexton, but consistent the whole way through. And it's the same with Casey. Is that like
he's a different player, Ross Byrne. The one that can do potentially the Sexton stuff is Crowley, because he's more of a runner than Ross Byrne. That's not. Ross Byrne's strengths are different, and he's very much composed, and he's a very talented out half, and he does brilliantly with Leinster with pace and tempo. But if you're nitpicking, Crowley is the one. But then is Crowley as composed in the game when your forwards are doing well, and you kind of give that armchair right to your halfbacks.
We don't know yet, do we?
Yeah, we don't know. So it was a bit disjointed the other day. And if you were to rate all the Irish players, you're kind of giving them 6, 7s. You're kind of hard to go 8, 9s. You know what I mean?
You're not giving him a 5. Casey got a 5, and Ross Byrne got a 6 from the Irish Times.
Is there anyone?
It's harsh, I think. I think it's harsh, I would say.
Was there anyone then looking ahead to Scotland that really put their hand up for
Well,
Andy
the one
Farrell?
that stands out for me, without thinking about it too much, is Ryan Baird off the bench. I just think this guy's an incredible athlete. And I think with pace and tempo, the way the game has gone now, the way Scotland play, the way Ireland want to play, I think he can add so much to your overall attack, your cover around the field.
Is he in instead of Henderson? Henderson was Henderson was grand, right?
Yeah,
like no mistakes, but no sense of explosion the way when Henderson was at his very best. Breaking into the team early in his career. And maybe that's just because that's how life is. You get 80 caps and we're like, we know exactly what you can do. Ryan Baird has 10 caps, and it's like, Baird might be this explosive.
If you look at the enthusiasm, the energy, the small details that Ireland have become so good at, their clean out, their urgency to get to breakdowns, their support player and attack, all that kind of stuff would indicate that someone like Ryan Byrne can only add to that kind of stuff because he's so fit, he's so athletic. If you think then of the nitty-gritty, winning mauls, hard yards, experience, you're thinking, Ian Henderson can do really. So it depends what the detail when they break it down and the work rate. And there's
a role for both of them in the World Cup squad for sure.
Of course, yeah. But I think Ryan Baird is someone that I'm a big fan of, and I think he's someone that can really add to that attack. But then if you're in Murrayfield in 2 weeks on Sunday and the weather is poor and it's wet and it's windy, that's not saying he can't be physical, but we probably need to see it, So I think it's worth taking a chance with him, and he potentially probably deserves a start.
In the second row?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the back row, Peter Marty comes straight back in and Conan back to the bench. Is that just...
You would think so. Again, it's a tough game. For the 4 or 5 players and the changes that were made, it's one of those ones where you're kind of banging your fist a little bit after, saying it's a shame it's not 25 point win, and the game opened up and it was lovely, scoring 3 tries at the end, and Italy were tough, but we got loads of touches of the ball. They got no time, no space. Like the impact tackles out of the Italians were smashing Irish players in the gain line. And that's why it's really beneficial to Ireland, because I think they, for the first time in this championship, they had to play with slow ball at times and behind the gain line. So that would be very beneficial to them. I thought they needed to kick better at times, out of hand, as I said, not just Ross Byrne, but tactically we could have added some more kicks in there. Tactical kicks, not just thumping it away for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Just
very briefly on this, because I don't want to labour too much, but we didn't go for points when we had a penalty right in front of the goals that would have taken it from 7 to 10 points. We went, kicked to the corner and lost the line out and just put ourselves under a bit of pressure. it strikes me that it's like Sexton sometimes just goes up and goes, I'll take the points, and we're like, oh, he never takes the points, but then actually he does sometimes. If he'd been captain, would he have done that? Because this is at the start of the second half, we've got the 4 tries bonus. There's just this is a captaincy question really. James Ryan needs to learn these things. They were talking about it on ITV afterwards. Just take the points, spread the gap to 10.
Yeah, of course. When you see how the game unfolded and it's back to 7 points, back to 4 points. Yes, you're then saying but
in the moment though,
you go back to New Zealand, they're kicking to the corner when there's kickable penalties because they back themselves. And I think if you have...
There was no bonus points on offer against New Zealand though. You wanted to win that game and crush them, and like with Italy,
you have the bonus point, and it's a relevant point you make that they probably should have kicked for the points. Yeah, Ross Byrne has to kick because it's 24-20 and 63rd minute, and that's non-negotiable there.
Yeah.
But I think Paul O'Connell will be probably saying, well, why did you lose the line out? He'll be focused on who missed their lift, was the throw right or wrong. Yeah. So,
and also Kelleher now slightly ahead of Dan Sheehan.
They're two wonderful players.
Look, it's 1A and 1B,
yeah,
totally.
Yeah, I just think it's brilliant that Ronan Kelleher, and if you're talking about players who kind of stood out, like he could have got 3 or 4 turnovers in that game. He was so alert. He's just brilliant at the breakdown, and he runs so hard, and his scrummaging is brilliant as well. So it's incredible. 2 of those guys fit. Impact off the bench. If one of the others coming off the bench, it's brilliant, and I think it's brilliant to have him back and have him fit and well again.
Okay. All right, have we time for one quick? France, what's the story? Is there like Scotland were good, right? But France's ill discipline allowed them back into the game with the red card, and then they just, I don't know. Roger's been talking about France kind of coming off a peak.
A little bit, maybe. I think Scotland were outstanding, and they played with great pace, tempo, the attack. France are very physical, and I still think they're laborious at times in what they do. They kick a lot, but Scotland just held on to the ball so well. And if you build multi-phase against, it's always been the case. They're a very powerful side. You have to double up sometimes in the tackle when Willem says Carrion and Aldred and Marchand and these guys, because they're very physical players. But Scotland did that. I think we should be more concerned about what Scotland are doing here. Obviously, because we played them next, they can take a lot. It was a brilliant performance from Scotland, and it was a brilliant match to watch.
Okay.
And if you consider Wales England on Saturday was punishing to do it. England kicked the ball 38 times, Wales 34.
Yeah. Not a classic under the roof. Before we go, we should just mark the passing of Tom Tierney and obviously send our condolences to his family. You were a teammate, and it must have really devastated the squad, because this obviously, unfortunately, is going to be a familiar territory for you guys.
Yeah, it's just another shock, I think, with what happened, Tom. It's hard to believe when you're that young that can happen, and obviously after Axel a number of years ago as well, and it's just another hammer blow to people who are close and involved with Tom. And he was coaching that the day before in Munster on the field with the academy, and the one thing that everybody you hear saying now is how funny Tom was, how much of a character he was. I even listened to some of the English Ben Kay at the weekend from Tom's time at Leicester. He was a brilliant character. Every time you'd meet Tom, there's a little bit of a joke or fun. It's devastating, really, and it's such a shock, and it's hard to process it again. And obviously for Mary and the kids and his extended family, it's hard to comprehend what's happened again.
All right, we'll leave it there. And as I said, we send our condolences to the Tierney family and to you guys and all your teammates as well, and everybody who's come in contact with him. That is definitely the story that is emerging of Tom Tierney as a man. A reminder that we're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. If you want to get in touch with us, you can text the show 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number, or you can get us at OffTheBallAM on Twitter. Now, turning our attention to football, Andy Mitten joins us to talk to us about the first trophy of the Eric Ten Hag era. Andy, it feels like it is the first of a new era. What's your immediate feelings this morning when you wake up?
How absolutely shattered I am because I've not had enough sleep, and I've got to get a lot of work done. But I'm buzzing, I'm smiling because it's the first trophy for 6 years for Manchester United. It was a great day at Wembley yesterday and pretty comfortable actually for Manchester United, even though Newcastle United, I thought, played well and had most of the possession. But it wasn't just yesterday, beating Barcelona on Thursday night. February's been a superb month for Manchester United, and Erik ten Hag is overachieving. I said at the start of this season that a top 4 finish and a trophy would be success for this season. And while Manchester United are far from confirmed in the top 4, the team are really well placed in the league and have won a trophy. It's been a while, and not something that Manchester United fans take for granted. Tickets were like hen's teeth for Wembley yesterday. They were going for well over 4 figures. But about 40,000 Manchester United fans travelled down to London. The mood was great, and people were just saying we missed these trips to Wembley because there was a time where maybe there was a bit of Wembley fatigue. It was, oh no, not another trip to Wembley. And that sounds horribly spoiled because Manchester United fans were spoiled. But with COVID and with teams who've not been vintage Manchester United sides, trips have been far, far fewer. And the last trip was a defeat in the FA Cup final to Chelsea in 2018. There was a defeat in 2021 in that Europa League final to Villarreal. So to actually win a trophy, it vindicates the hard work that Erik ten Hag, his staff, his players are doing. It'll give them a real lift. People might sneer and say it's only the League Cup. Well, it was only the League Cup in 2006, and Manchester United built on that, won the league. Premier League a year later, were European champions a year after that, and world champions as well. I'm not saying that's going to happen this time, but Manchester United are in a really good place at the moment. And it feels like a buzz to be a Manchester United fan. I was speaking to loads and loads of people yesterday. You can just feel it. And been some pretty tough times in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years as a Manchester United fan. I'm sure most football fans will not be getting out their violins to say, oh no, poor Manchester United. But you support your team's your team. And success and failure is all relative. It felt brilliant.
Andy, it is remarkable how quickly Ten Hag has been able to get this side to a high level of consistency. You're going into yesterday's game and it almost went exactly as predicted. You know that De Gea is going to make a couple of vital saves. You expect Martinez and Varane to have important interventions at crucial moments of the game, for Casemiro to run the show midfield, to Rashford to turn up at the big moments. Like, that's not something anyone was taking for granted 6 months ago.
Not at all. The players that you mentioned, I mean, Casemiro is one of the best midfielders in the world. And I saw that with Madrid. Everyone saw it. But there were some Manchester United fans saying, he won't come. Madrid won't sell him. He's coming for a final payday. Absolute nonsense. Probably the team's most important player. Linked back up with Rafael Varane. They won everything at Real Madrid. And when you buy players like that, you hope, pretty much guaranteed, that they're going to do well. But Manchester United fans have been scarred by world-class players coming and being flops. Angel Di Maria, Bastian Schweinsteiger, Radamel Falcao, for various different reasons. Alexis Sanchez, but the recruitment has improved a lot. You said Marcus Rashford, he's been fantastic this season. It's his best season. I spoke to him pre-season in Australia, and he talked about the importance of having a proper pre-season. But the man who deserves the most credit is the manager. He's got a really good staff around him, but he's a disciplinarian, he's decisive, he's a tactician, he's humorous, and yet he's a people person as well. And he's overachieving at the moment. Manchester United in this competition tend to be knocked out by Manchester City, who've dominated the competition. So when they went out, not that United would have been too scared because United beat City only last month, it boded well for the game against Newcastle. Newcastle were excellent at Old Trafford in October, and I think they're a good team, but the results have dropped a little bit in the last month, whereas Manchester United's been really good. That win against Barcelona really lifted the players. There's a big buzz around Old Trafford, so they've carried that momentum forward, and hopefully they continue to do that for the rest of this season. They're still in the FA Cup, still in the Europa League. And having knocked out Barcelona, you've got to say Manchester United will be the favourites, or along with Arsenal, the favourites for that competition. So 2 more trophies still to play for. I wouldn't say a third with the Premier League, but then I've just brought it up as well.
I know. I mean, like, I think the morning after a cup final where you've won, you're allowed to daydream a little bit about how the rest of the season might go, particularly because there's plenty for Manchester City to do for the rest of the season. There's plenty for Arsenal to do for the rest of the season for them both, not to be just like, oh yeah, we're guaranteed to be able to replicate the form week in, week out between now and the end of the year. Let's just talk about Ten Hag, because I think I do wonder if all that recruitment of those world-class players you spoke about was actually bad, or if just the conditions at the club were always wrong when they arrived. And that's the difference, is that this manager and his team have managed to put together processes, systems, a culture really, really quickly that is allowing players who, weren't very good to emerge as actually really useful squad players, and players who were really good to find their best form. It's remarkable how it's kind of Klopp-esque at the moment, where almost everything he's touching is working.
Yeah, and he knows there's still a long way to go, by the way. He knows that he needs 2, 3, 4 players, but he did it very quickly. He did it within weeks. He sat down with all of his staff and told them exactly what he wanted from them in a 3-hour meeting. And all the early indications I got were really positive. So multiple people talking to me, and they're all saying pretty much the same thing. And trust me, I was not getting that with the previous manager. And my job is to reflect the truth. The truth can be very subjective in football. It's not to tell Manchester United fans what they want to hear. You've got to tell them what's going on. You've got to give insight. But everything I've heard about him, and we've seen his actions publicly, he's got it right. He got it right with Cristiano Ronaldo. He got it right dropping players like Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire who weren't performing. Sounds really simple. It looks like he's got it right with Jadon Sancho, how he's treated him. So to do this in his first season, managing in a new country, in a language which isn't his first language, is a major achievement. And he's hungry for more. He knows that one League Cup will not be his legacy at Manchester United. He was staff around him. He's got a really good mixture there between youth and experience, drawn from a diverse background, from Japan, from South Africa, from Steve McLaren, an old hand who brings humour and know-how of what it's like to be in the Premier League. Mitchell van der Gaag is his assistant. I just hear good things about him as well. The football's good, which is why Manchester United went for him. But going for a top manager doesn't give you any guarantees. Manchester United hoped that Louis van Gaal would work, that Jose Mourinho would work. And for various reasons, that they didn't, although both of them won trophies. But will they be remembered as successful Manchester United managers? Well, probably not. They absolutely had the moments. And Erik ten Hag's having his moment now. But I sense he's building something much more solid for the future. There's a game in October when United went to Chelsea and attacked them. I've not seen that for years. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had some great moments, got the team to second in the Premier League, played some really good football. But when he played against the best teams, he was going off the counter-attack. And I know against Newcastle United, Manchester United were most effective on the counter-attack. But I sense a much more solid base being built. Casemiro is the best midfielder that club has had for years.
For United then to take the next step and challenge for titles on a regular basis, challenge for the Champions League again, you'd expect they're going to go in and invest during the summer, and maybe, depending on the takeover, there is an infinite amount of money for them to go and spend this coming summer. I was saying earlier, and I'm getting hammered by Manchester United supporters online, I see, for suggesting that one of the players who they may look at is Bruno Fernandes, who I've sort of felt has not been as consistent as you would expect for a player of his quality and reputation this season. Even yesterday it felt he had an alright game, but wasn't one of the standout players on the pitch. What are the areas that you think United will look at over the course of the summer to really go and invest in heavily? And, is Bruno Fernandes one of those players that there's still quite a bit of room that Ten Hag can get more out of him?
Yeah, he was admonishing yesterday from the side, and I don't know exactly what he was saying, but it seemed to be about his positioning. I think Bruno Fernandes has had a good season. He takes risks because he wants the rewards from those risks. But I think he's a top player. I think he'll go for other players like centre forward who I mentioned. I don't think Wout Weghorst is the long-term solution for Manchester United up front. Anthony Martial is injured far too often for him, for his manager to be able to rely on him. I think Bruno Fernandes will continue to improve with better players around him. So when he came in January 2020, he lifted the players around him. United was so flat at that time. But now he's got better players, more experienced players around him. So he's maybe not the best example, but a lot of those younger players, take Anthony, they can learn from the actions of Varane and from Casemiro. There's a pretty good spine there now. You've got that defence. Lisandro Martinez is excellent. You've got Varane, who I've mentioned, Casemiro. You've got Marcus Rashford, the sort of homegrown hero who's doing really well. And Luke Shaw's been effective. So if he can get more of a tune consistently out of hugely talented players like Jadon Sancho, then Manchester United should improve significantly. I still think it's going to be very difficult because of the way that Manchester City resourced, Newcastle United as well. Chelsea, who knows what's going to happen there. Liverpool's been the major surprise this year. I thought it would be Manchester City and Liverpool. Really did. I'm really surprised at how Liverpool had such a difficult season. But that's football. It changes so quickly, as Manchester United fans have shown this season. So he'll recruit well. And there's good people like Darren Fletcher. They're bringing in players based clearly on the talent, but also on the personalities as well. And the players who are coming in are adding to that dressing room positivity. They're not detracting from it. And trust me, 1 year ago, there were plenty of players there who were detracting from it.
Andy, we'll let you go. Enjoy the day's work. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Thank you.
That's Andy Mitten there. I think that's the other thing, Nathan, that's happened is that all the leaks have stopped. We're not hearing about training ground bust-ups and any of that stuff anymore.
No, it feels as though the entire club is better managed, that he somehow got control of the entire structure of the organisation, which the off-the-pitch stuff had become laughable at one stage, where they'd have these shareholders meetings and they'd be boasting about having more Instagram followers in the world than anybody else, and every second day to be a new commercial partnership announced, as we touch on with the suit deal and all of that, that actually he now has total control of everything that involves the players. So, yeah, it's... Again, to think where they were just 4 months ago in that City game to where they are now.
Two quick comments. Niall Keane says, Nathan, the most bitter Liverpool fan ever. Get used to it, pal. You're in for a miserable time of it. Ha, 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 ha. Ha, ha. And then this one. Anyone who thinks Bruno's not important does not watch United. He is United's best player. He does a phenomenal amount of work, creates so much, bizarrely underrated. Care to answer any of the charges against you, Nathan?
I'm not saying Bruno Fernandes isn't a very good player. I'm asking the question, if Manchester United are looking to go to another level, is Bruno Fernandes someone whose position might actually be at risk?
Okay, Colin says you're backtracking.
I'm not. I don't think he's been. I don't think he's been exceptional. I don't think if anyone's picking their team of the season, Bruno Fernandes is going to be in it.
I mean, that wasn't the weird. That's a bit of a straw man argument you're putting up there. Anyway, let's move on because Anthony Moyles is with us in studio. Anthony, good morning to you.
Morning, gents.
Nathan has
sounds like backtracking to me, Ger.
Nathan has already been talking about Mayo. We managed.
Let's talk about Kildare.
We managed to lull him into we're actually really good. We will talk about Kildare. We can do that. That's fine. Tailteann Cup. I mean, it's
going to be a really good one this year.
Vastly underrated competition, I feel. You know,
yeah.
Maybe we haven't paid enough attention to this in the past.
It could arguably be more important than the real one, than the Sam.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, any port in a storm.
Oh yeah, well, I don't think you'd be on your own. We may be in it as well. So the way things are going,
Division 2 is the bear pit that we thought it was going to be. Let's start at Division 1, right? Because Mayo did Hockey Tyrone, and it's not Tyrone's only bad performance so far. It's also not Mayo's only good performance so far. But we've seen this before from Tyrone in the league, where they have a bad time. We're kind of taking it as a matter of course that they'll recover, but last season they didn't recover.
Yeah.
So what's the truth? Where do you stand on where they are at the moment?
It's funny. I watched the game back last night purely for the real, two aspects. I wanted to see, just because we were obviously talking about Tyrone and the performances haven't been great over the last while. And I wanted to see, was it more of a mental thing? Was it something that they've been trying to do something different? Are they, trying to change the style of play? Or is it just that there's something missing? And a real hangover, which they've been suffering now for quite a spell, actually. And I don't think they're trying to do anything different. They seem to have, same personnel, by and large, same setup, really. They have Frank Burns, I suppose, in. He is kind of playing as a six, a double six. He's sitting in front. He was sitting in front of O'Shea a lot last night, or should I say on Saturday. But I tell you what they're missing. They're missing a spark, Ger. Like they're missing something. They were actually really good. First 20, 25 minutes, they were arguably the better team. They actually could have been 6 points to 2 up. They could have actually been 1-5 to 2 up. They had a good goal chance just before actually the ball got sent down the other end and Mayo got their first goal. But literally when the first goal went in for Mayo, it was just like bang, someone just popped the balloon and the air just went out of them. The body language straight away, you see fellas just turning around. There wasn't even any kind of real spikiness, there wasn't any narkiness, there wasn't fellas going, you didn't track that run. They just turned around, heads went straight down, and they just, kind of assumed and resumed back out to their positions. Which, for Tyrone, as we know, in their pomp a couple of years ago, there was an arrogance, there was a in your face, there was a very much, we're going to put you down and we're going to come back at you again and again and again, we're going to grind you down. And there wasn't that. They seemed meek. They just seemed to be. They weren't bullied, and they actually had some. Like I focused on it because I actually thought they were actually playing some decent patterns of play. But literally from that goal and then the second goal, it was just like it just went from bad to worse as from a confidence level. And then it looks like they're doing it, but they're not really doing it. Like the Hessian goal was just an outstanding piece of skill. But if you actually watch it beforehand, 3 Tyrone players stop. Like Peter Hart is running back. As Hessian gets the ball, originally, Hart is in front of him. Hessian moves forward, plays the 1-2, Hart stops, Moyles stops, and then I can't remember the third Tyrone player stops. And they all stop thinking, oh, someone else is going to do something here. Morgan is going to save it. And it doesn't happen, of course. And then the last goal is an absolute... Like, if you watch the last goal, McCurry is standing there. Like, it's a total... just lack of awareness who's actually doing their job. He has to chase back. He's actually marking his man behind the free, if you get me. He starts chasing O'Connor, and then as the goal goes in, he turns around and he's just looking and he's saying, like, where are we here? Know? So I think there's a number of things going on.
That's an attitude thing, though, right? That's not. They haven't become bad footballers. They haven't had like 1/5 of the team decide to leave. Yeah. So that's not unfixable. Although,
honestly, if you'd gone to the game and you left after 25 minutes, you go, Mayo were possibly in trouble here because they were actually finding gaps. They were running at Mayo down the middle. They were clipping over a few good scores. McShane was causing a little bit of problem, but then. I tell you where they're struggling, I think, a little bit, and you're right on what you say. It is an attitudinal situation, okay? I don't know why that's being caused. I don't know if there's something going on in the background. I don't know if it's because of the dual mandate on the management team. I don't know. Things don't look like a happy camp, to be honest. They don't look happy on the sideline. They don't look happy on the pitch. I haven't heard any stories. It's been fairly tight, so maybe it will come out. But they seem like a team that definitely require a spark, but a spark just doesn't come. You have to generate it. You really have to. And they seem like they're kind of literally on the ropes now, just waiting to be knocked out. And I
don't feel it's not potentially a fitness thing where they're in this new calendar thinking, you know what, Ulster, we're going to take that seriously. We're going to try and peak 6 weeks down the line, where Kevin McStay's come in and said, I want Mayo fighting at full cylinders right from the off.
I don't know. I don't think so, Nathan. They didn't look off it from a fitness perspective last night. Again, it's not a fitness thing. It's a thing in your mindset. Like I remember years ago, we played a game against Wexford, and I remember Colm Coyle was over us, and we had the game obviously videoed, and Matty Ford cut in. He got a ball on the left-hand side. He cut in, and I remember there was 3 or 4 of us chasing him back. Now, it looked like we were chasing him back. But as he pointed out in the video, we watched it repeatedly, and he called us all, and we absolutely got strips torn off us. We weren't really, we weren't going flat out to get him. We were motioning it, and there's a slight difference, but you can see it. So the Tyrone lads are kind of, from the optics, it looks like they're really pushing it, but they're not. They're not at it where they were, say, 2 years, where there was just that manic sense of we have to get back, we have to crowd these players out, we have to get to the ball. We even in their attack, their attack is very one kind of off runner. So in other words, if you watch like McShane, I don't know if you saw it, but he after the second goal he gets a ball and he comes inside on his left foot and he goes to kick it, and he drops it in front of the goalkeeper. It bounces in front of the goalie from about 25 yards out. He fists another one wide and he kicks another one really bad. And every single time that happened, well, actually, you could look at it and say, geez, that's terrible football. But he had no options. He had no fellas coming at him at angles. There's no real sense. They're not trying anything different as well in the forward. So I think there's a major crisis there, and they need to fix it. And I don't think it's necessarily we're trying to look to build for later in the year. They have a lot of issues.
What about on the other side, Mayo and their ability to find these hard-running half-backs who are creative and score-getters? And also, it turns out the mercurial forwards are no longer mercurial, they're just good.
Yeah, it's funny to watch the progression of Mayo, obviously, from a team who, they would have relied on the likes of Keegan and Durkin and guys like this coming forward and clipping scores for them. And albeit Hessian gets that amazing goal, they have gone from a team that, yes, they have that, but they're not overly reliant on it anymore. So we, for the last number of years, would have always said, and I would have said, they need to find that extra bit of talent inside. So they have O'Donoghue, but the reliance on O'Donoghue is actually getting less and less, not because he's not well capable, but actually other guys are sharing the load. So every week, which is a positive for them, someone else is coming and stepping forward. So, last week it was the half forward, who kicked 4 scores.
Ted Carr.
No,
previous
Jordan.
week.
Yes.
Jordan.
So he steps up. Carr steps up. Aidan O'Shea is playing probably arguably the best football he's ever played, right? And his hands are excellent.
Dermot Connolly-esque, Nathan was saying.
Well, the ball in was absolutely peach of a ball. But you can see what they're doing. They're mixing long with short. They're mixing intricate little plays when it's crowded out, which Tyrone obviously did. They were quite happy to go left and right, but then try to find O'Shea with a pass. But unlike McShane on the far side, as soon as he receives the ball, he has 2 or 3 runners come and pass him at pace, and that's the key thing to break that mass defence. The pace is the key thing.
He has always been able to play that kick pass as well. That's the midfielder in him coming out. But
absolutely.
Actually, he doesn't have those responsibilities of the midfielder to get back and be completely shattered because they're running the legs off you.
Correct.
Up and down, up and down, up and down.
And the reliance on him out there, they used to get overrun. There was a sense that you'd get at Mayo because of you'd overrun their midfield events. So, but they've got loads of legs out in the middle of the field. Now, on the flip side, and this is where I would caution a little bit, and we cautioned last week about this, they're scoring a lot of goals. They're not scoring a massive amount of points. They got 13 scores. I think it was 4-9, was it, or 4-10? So you kind of go, okay. And again, like Kerry last week, even though Tyrone were dead and buried, they could have put a big score on them. Now maybe McStay, he made a few substitutions. He probably said, much like the Kerry game, well, this is nearly done at half time. Do we really need to push on? But the mentality should always be that you do push on. You don't give a sucker a second chance. So they should have put a real marker down on Tyrone. I thought they were a little bit sloppy second half, and actually they could have got more scores. But I think I suppose the warning sign I would put on Mayo a little bit is that teams will now start to look at them and work them out a bit and say, right, well, actually, can you go and kick scores from range, or are you heavily reliant on your goal scoring ability?
Yeah.
But there's no doubt about it. They are playing with a massive confidence now, and you can see. And like, if you were to put smiley faces on, like they're smiling, they're happy. You can see the camp. There's a togetherness. Tyrone is complete disarray.
Is there a bit of Schmidt Farrell with Horan McStay that Horan puts the basics there yet again, and we saw last time. Then Rochford comes in and sort of brings them to a new level. He's given a lot of these guys their time over the last couple of years. He's bedded them in, and now actually it's been left to somebody else to.
Well, you could be like the Hessian goal is is that a symptom of that? In the sense of, like, you would know a number of years ago he kind of burst onto the scene. Then he got lost then for a while. He was a sub for a while. I remember kind of looking last year saying, well, like, why isn't it? Because I was really impressed with him. I thought he was a really, really good player. Confidence obviously got hit. I think he got injured before it. But he did the man marking job on Paddy Clifford last week, and he did it really, really well. So he's an excellent footballer. But his ability in that is that he just doesn't give the pass and he doesn't get it and just ship it left or right or kind of go back. He's thinking forward all the time. and he's thinking go and receive, and all of them are thinking that.
That's
and that's a
isn't
mindset
it?
change.
Yeah. And it's the exact opposite of the mindset that we were talking about with Tyrone. So definitely little acorns there for all the Mayo fans to get suitably carried away with.
Yeah.
Choo-choo. On board that hype train, Nathan.
No.
You did a good.
It's still February, isn't it?
You did a good job damping it down earlier on. We were like, we've got the best forwards. Anyway, Kerry Armagh game was really interesting in that Armagh had a very specific plan, and we're still waiting to see Kerry. You know, this is early stage Kerry. This is a very early season for them, and as we've been talking about in the show a little bit earlier on, the championship structure doesn't really do Kerry at this time of the year any favours in terms of want. They don't need anything. They just need not to get relegated, and then everything will be happy. They want to be in the middle, and you know that game against Cork looks like it's going to be interesting. Cork are good again, but after that they're still going to be in a round robin where they're definitely going through to an All-Ireland quarter-final. You know, there's zero jeopardy from our perspective about Kerry being in an All-Ireland quarter-final. So I think Jack O'Connor made a big deal of like losing against Donegal and the performance against Mayo. He was sickened about after that, and then everybody's back in now. There was no rest for the Cliffords, no kind of sense that and Paul Murphy was straight in as well. So they do want results, and getting the result in a performance like that is probably the type of thing that afterwards that's just giving the team confidence again.
I think he wants results, but he doesn't want a sense of apathy coming into it, and we'll just rest on our laurels. He wants that challenge and that competitiveness in the team. He wants fellas stepping up. He probably, one of the things we've mentioned is he a bad injury to one of his main guys? He wants depth. So yesterday I thought Armagh were really good, actually. They set their stall out. And it was kind of like a battle of two basketball, kind of, you could see it, between obviously Donaghy on one side. You have a situation where Armagh's press, if you watch what Armagh do, and this is kind of, we'll talk about Kildare and a couple of other teams later on, but Armagh do what's a thing in basketball which works really, really well from a defensive point of view, is that you sync with the ball. We spoke about this before. But if the ball passes you by, you try to get back to that situation. So as a defender, you look and you try to have everything out in front of you. So if the ball comes out, you're able to push up. If the ball goes in behind, you get back. You don't turn your back on the ball. So all the defenders are watching where the ball is and one eye on their man. So Armagh yesterday, Kerry found it very, very difficult to break that down. Anything down through the middle, they came into the honeypot and they were just trying to grab them. The only way you beat that is pace. That's the only way you can beat it, and angles of running. So you get the ball in, and whoever receives it inside, it's just one touch football then. You don't take a play on the ball. It's one touch. It's fast hands. And if you watch any of the good scores Kerry got, where they sliced through Armagh, it was one touch. I give it into Nathan, he slips it to you, I'm coming off your left, you slip it to me, and the defenders don't have an opportunity to reset their feet and tackle you. Armagh will be happy. He'll be disappointed they lost it, because it was a couple of moments of just, McQuillan at the end. He has Shawnee O'Shea, and then he kind of gives him a second dunt, and the referee blows him for it. And that was a free that kind of really just set it apart. They had an opportunity themselves. But I don't think he'd be overly disappointed, because he went toe to toe with them. And by the way, that was a ding dong yesterday, or the other. There was plenty in it. The referee, I know we're always trying to give referees a bit of stick, but I thought the referee from Galway, he was sporting a pair of Vans trainers, which I thought were very, very, very kind of retro. Galway man, but I thought he refereed it brilliantly. He let things go. He let the intensity go, and it was as close to a championship kind of fair as you would get this time of the year. Like Armagh decided, right, we're going to give it to you, and Kerry didn't shy away from it.
So Armagh coming away from that feeling good about themselves?
I think so. Yeah, like absolutely. I think they would be happy. I think they'd be disappointed they didn't get something out of the game. Absolutely, they will be. On Kerry, on the flip side, again, he is motioning towards a team that is just building confidence.
Yeah. Like it's been great listening to Paddy Andrews over the last 3 seasons explain how the league mattered to them at different stages and why individual matches would be. And then I thought Liam Hayes put it well last week when he was talking about that's a team that wins 1 point games. He was talking about Mitten Jim Gavin. They win a lot of 1 point games. That just speaks to mindset.
Yeah.
And like, so Kerry can't fake that game in the Munster Championship until they get to the end of the Munster Championship. And again, there's probably, depending on the draw, they could end up having a bunch of Division 3 teams in Sam Maguire. So these matches are actually, that's the bit where it matters. Like, it matters a few individual performances, a bit of depth, and then him putting the pressure on them. We need league points. We need to win this game.
Yeah. I know it is, and it is putting pressure on, because without the application of pressure, you won't find what your players will do when they're faced with it. You know, so these new guys who are coming in, such as Roach and a few other fellas, you need to find that they can do it, and all he really needs to get is an extra two guys, two fellas where he'll say they may not necessarily be starting, but they're guys that he can look to. Like Brosnan comes on, he kicks a great score near the end, under pressure, a score that they needed out on the right hand side with his left kick. That again is, you're coming on to do a job, and we need you to get a score here.
Yeah.
He comes up, he sticks it, you know, and ultimately that's probably one of the winning scores. But what O'Connor will like is the fact that he knows, like, if we're sitting down and we're saying, right, here are our league games, and that's why the league, especially at this time of the year, can be a bit tricky. I thought some teams yesterday, not to do a disservice to Monaghan, but Roscommon looked like to me they did a big heavy week this week. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they did 4 or 5 days in a row, because some fellas will say, you know, I've got my points on the board.
Yeah, well, Davey afterwards was saying, finally that whole we're all beaten for a year and a half thing, that nonsense is over. I was like, never seen a man as happy that, like, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, the league takes on different nuances. I'd say he'd be delighted, because he'll now bring them down a couple of pegs. You know, because this could have been a runaway train. Next thing you end up going into the Connacht Championship and you're bet. And you're kind of going, Jesus, where are we now? So O'Connor knows that Armagh game is a big game. He's saying this is against probably top 3 or 4, 5 in the county opposition. This is a game who they're going to provide us with something that we will face, which is that defence I spoke about, where they're just saying, you know what, we're happy to make this 9 points each.
Yeah.
We don't want to kick 16 points. We're actually, because people were saying, you know, Armagh weren't very adventurous in the first. Didn't want to be adventurous in the first half, because if they were adventurous in the first half, they would have left gaps behind. They were literally saying, this is rope-a-dope stuff. You know, we're going to sit here, we're going to wait, and then we're going to try to tag on our scores.
Yeah.
But we're certainly not going to get sucked out by you.
That was practice for the Ulster Championship for them.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 3 of the Leinster teams and by extension Louth as well. So the Dubs, Paul Gavin was making the point on Twitter that perhaps they're actually happy enough, listed off like 6 players that they were missing, come from 6 points down against Clare. Poor Clare for the second week in a row.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Clare were heartbroken going back down the road, because it would have been a big win for them. Either that or something really bad has happened in Dublin. You know, like, again, they don't have to peak. They've like one game in Leinster that probably won't be that risky.
Yeah.
And then they're through to Sam Maguire. So, and they too now have, they did Derry next week. So interesting to see what kind of a team they put out there.
Yeah, it's I think, again, very, very passive first half. You know, Clare got some, but it was, you know, they were very, very passive. No real sense of intensity. They started to increase the level of intensity the second half, especially when they went, or whatever it was, 6 or 7 down. And all of a sudden, then they started turning Clare over. They started transitioning the ball faster. But he brought the big guns on. He probably ended up with, I'd say, arguably 5 of his 6 starting forwards on the field, if not 6 of 6. We spoke about this last week. I don't think they have unearthed anything different, neither in a major forward who can take the mantle or the style of play that they're really doing. You know, they're still running the same patterns of play. Like Kilkenny is still doing this kind of east to west thing where he's trying to, and teams are actually going, that's fine. You know, I'm not actually going to put a man on you. He's different to Clifford. Clifford, when he's doing that role, will stop, look, and ping a pass. Kilkenny will, you know, he'll give these kind of looping hand passes to guys. But people are kind of saying, well, actually, we know what they're going to do. As the ball comes in, they either do that basketball move, which is the one where they come towards you and then they go the backdoor cut, or they'll do the loop around. So
they don't quite have the discipline as well in their shot taking that they had of the Gavin era, where, you know,
you get hammered for shooting if you didn't score.
Yeah, so you've a couple of guys like James McCarthy was taking a few shots, which, you know, wasn't his forte. You know, you've got guys taking shots from bad angles, wrong shot selection. But
so you're not convinced?
I'm not. No, I'm not. I like, again, they'd usually blow Clare away. You know, they would. They've played Kildare. Like, we've seen how Kildare's progression has gone since the start of the year. And like, I mean, Kildare could have easily won that game first night.
Yeah.
You know, so you're kind of going, where is the spark?
Unless they are doing the heavy block of training, and they're like, and maybe Mannion is that forward who is the one, and so
you've Mannion, you've John Small, right? So they make a difference. You've Howard to come back, but again, like, I mean, but in the last number of years, they would have always been missing fellas. And we've no one would have ever said, oh well, they have to get Ting back. They would have just said, well, they've missed him, but they've loads of talent. So what I think they've now got their guys who they have had for the last number of years. But I'm not saying, Jesus, there's 3 or 4 fellas who are ready to take them out. Like, McCaffrey came on and kind of provided the spark. So they're kind of going, well, we have to go back to him.
Well,
You know? So that's a worry.
Not much rather be them than us, I have to say.
Thanks. I'm being thrown into the mixer here, obviously.
Well, I think so, because I thought it looked like Louth were going to come up and go straight back down, but that's not the case. They now have they've got Kildare next week, and they're going to be feeling themselves. They owe Kildare after last season in the championship.
Absolutely.
And this is a chance for them to at home. I didn't realise yesterday's game was in Park Talchin until I looked at it there. So Meath get caught by Louth, and then Louth Kildare next week. Because essentially, if Kildare lose that, they're more than likely going to be in the Talchin Cup. Well,
depending on how. I wasn't at the game, but I was talking to a few people who were. 20 minutes into the second half, Meath are a man down and they're 5 points up. You're saying, right, turn the radio off, they'll see this one out here. And they end up losing by 3. They only get 1 point in the last 15 minutes. So that's alarm bells time. Yeah, you could say the 14 men, you know, maybe, you know, playing against a breeze, running out of a bit of puff, blah, blah, blah. It's a worry. It's a massive, massive win for Louth. But in the actual intricacies of the game, they were very, very good on the press, I believe. They were very well organised in their defence, you know, which is what you expect. So Hart, Devlin is in there. You know, he has them playing. And again, it's kind of like the Derry thing. And similar to Mayo. Once you're playing to a pattern of play and you get buy-in from fellas, as soon as you get fellas saying question marks, you're going to say, right, okay, this guy is maybe not on board. But you look at Derry, you look at these teams that have the buy-in to that. And this is the modern game. It is. Like, I mean, people can say what they like about, oh, well, we need to be kicking the ball more. When the team have the opposition, you need to make sure that you set up in a way that you're trying your best, whether it's in your own half or whether it's in midfield or whether it's in their half. You're trying your best to put pressure and get the ball back.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's pretty simple when you think about it. Louth did that. Punish Meath, and if you want to look at the divergence between 2 sets of smiley faces, like Louth are coming into this game against Kildare absolutely buzzing, and Kildare have to be on the floor, because watching some of the highlights yesterday from Kildare, I was kind of saying, like, okay, Derry are playing really well, and Derry can do that to you, but coming to Newbridge, I was saying, you know, and I know people will say, oh, Kildare's game doesn't actually suit Newbridge, which I don't know if I buy that. Well, Jesus, the amount of one-on-one defending yesterday was outrageous. So watch back some of the goals, some of the scores. So when I say one-on-one defending, what I mean is Kildare guys, I'm going back to this thing about the ball and syncing with the ball. The ball in behind, and Kildare guys, I'm marking Nathan and I'm facing Nathan, and the play is all there. So it's now one-on-one inside.
So there's no strategy.
No strategy. That man gets skinned.
Strategy.
It's back at the net time. So
the difficulty is that Cork came to Newbridge and absolutely annihilated Kildare, and now Derry have come to Newbridge and annihilated them too. And their only victory is a come from behind victory away against Clare. So they're going to have to go to Louth and win that game.
Well,
next
it's a
week.
weird one, Ger. Like, I know you, but you know, for a team and a county where there was so much excitement about the management team.
Yeah,
like it's not that long ago we were talking about that. You know, the greats of the game in Kildare in the last 20 or 30 years, and pulling all of that experience and knowledge in. It's actually there actually isn't even a story about them. You know, like there hasn't been good or bad. So it's just kind of like they're there, and it's not a good situation. And that game next weekend is enormous for both teams.
All right, Anthony, we'll leave it there. for now. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.
More, of course, from the lads on the football pod a little bit later tonight. You can subscribe to the OTB GAA feed for you. A reminder, Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. Now Braeburn locations are popping up right across the country at Applegreen locations. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience. Here's some highlights on the OTB podcast network today. Brian Kerr chatting with Stephen Doyle after a 2-0 win for Spurs against Chelsea. The Sunday paper review with Kieran Cunningham and Shane Keegan joining Joe and Alison Miller reviewing Ireland's bonus point victory against Italy. Up next, Sarah Donovan talks about the weekend's hurling.
OTB
AM. OTB GAA.
I still get scared when I'm on my own and it's dark. I'll be very honest, and at times I don't like to be places that are no street lights and that type of thing, and kind of looking over my shoulder. Wouldn't put the earphones in as maybe I used to do. It's good to own it, and thanks for asking the question. It's good to talk about it too.
Subscribe to the OTB GAA podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, I'm delighted to say Sarah Donovan is with us to talk hurling and the weekend's hurling league action. It's harder for us to get meaningful stuff from the hurling league than it is from the football league. And yet there's definitely some bits and pieces that are important. You were at the Dublin Tip game.
Yeah, so we spoke last week about Tip and I was wondering, did they have depth? And they answered that. Brian O'Mara's in, Garrod O'Connor at centre forward, scored 4 great points. As well, the bench. Late on, they had Seamus Callan to come in, Noel McGrath to come in, and Bonner Marr to come in.
It's not bad, is it?
No, and if you look at the Dublin setup, they didn't have the same depth. They have a team, they have a structure, they have a core, but the players that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, the likes of Liam Rush, Chris Crummy, those are the guys that Dublin don't have coming in now, where Tip do.
We are talking to Anthony Nash on Fridays on Off the Ball, and he was talking about Brian O'Mara, and I haven't heard somebody who's coached a player offer as much praise up for somebody as he was effusive. He's your solution at 6, he's your solution at 3, he's your solution wherever you need a solution, and not many counties have that. Another Brian O'Mara in Tipperary as well. But what was so good of him, so impressive about him?
Well, it's his positioning. And his reading of the game. And I know Anthony was mentioning his personality and attitude, but outside of that, he's an out-and-out hurler. I suppose another hurler that I would say is similar to him is Diarmuid Ryan from Clare. That type of player who can play across the line. Ronan Marr, Mark Coleman in Cork, they're just players who are very comfortable in front of the ball and distributing the ball, like Barry Nash.
Yeah, and we kind of got into it a little bit about how Limerick essentially play with a 2-man full forward line and then somebody dropping deep, and if you just have your old traditional 3 backs and you're not really accounting for that, and so the modern defender needs to be either one week you're going to be a man marker, but then another week you're actually not. You're going to end up with loads of ball and you need to be really good at it, and that's where your reading of the game needs to come in. And maybe we don't fully appreciate that until the last 15 minutes of an All-Ireland quarter-final, semi-final, final.
Because of the distribution. So if you look at Barry Nash yesterday for Limerick, I suppose that's what Brian O'Mara offers Tip, because he's comfortable in that spot. Nash yesterday was picking out Darragh O'Donovan in midfield. Darragh O'Donovan's finding Tom Morrissey, and all of a sudden it's the easiest score of the game. So Tip, by doing that, by having a player in that position, because Michael Breen had been there for the last 2 weeks, and I suppose he offers you the more Garb McInerney style, strong physical full back.
You need them all, it turns out. You need a combination of all
to
these.
be able to push forward. But ultimately, if you can't get the ball out of your backs, you're given a kind of a 70-30 ball in favour of the opposition. You need to be giving a 70-30 ball in favour of your opposition, so that's what's key.
Will O'Callaghan was saying that Bonner Marr had been playing full forwards for the earlier stages. Is this an experiment? Is this where he has some kind of future? What do you think?
I love him at 11. I just think his vision is incredible. There's still a goal from 2019 that's one of the best goals I've ever seen that he was involved in. I think from Tipperary's point of view, the options the last night, that big strong half forward line, Seamus Kennedy scored 2 points. I said Garrod O'Connor scored 4 points. That inside, that 6 Tip forwards before Callan and Bonner ever came on, they were all on the scoreboard, and that's what you're looking for with Tip, is a spread of scores. By comparison, Dublin were heavily reliant on Donald Burke. He scored 14 points. He ended up getting the man of the match, which is hard to do on a losing team.
Yeah,
but that's how I suppose effective he is. But I think Dublin, by comparison, didn't have that same spread of scores.
What's success this year for Dublin? Well, at the end of the year, Micheál O'Donoghue sits down and goes, "Okay, that was a good year. What will it have been?"
Well, I would say, looking at Wexford yesterday against Clare, you'd be thinking that Dublin would fancy themselves now to go into third spot. That they would qualify out of the Leinster Championship into the All-Ireland Championship based on the last 3 games. I think they're definitely further ahead of Wexford. Wexford have a raft of injuries and long-term injuries at that. So, they got an awful trimming from Clare yesterday. So I think Dublin would be very happy knowing that they have a 3, a 6, Chris O'Leary in midfield for Dublin. Donald Burke, if that injury yesterday, he came off after 61 minutes on Saturday. If Dublin were to lose Donald Burke, Wexford and Dublin could be on par.
Well, only 2 of their 6 starting forwards scored on Saturday.
Then you had Sean Curry come in. Then you had Paul Crummy come in. I know it's a worry, but I really like Alex Considine. I think Cian Boland probably wasn't as clinical as he was against Waterford. I thought Dublin were much more assured against Waterford than they were against Tip, but they're still very busy and they're learning. It's hard in that first year to knit.
Let's talk about Limerick. So they ended up 5-point winners against Galway. A bit of controversy about Kyle Hayes not getting sent off, at least for a second yellow, although it's probably straight red when you smack somebody in the face with a hurl. Is it a straight red these days? I don't know. I mean, it's a manly sport, apparently, we keep getting told, where you're supposed to just take this shit, right?
Well, I watched the incident. I saw where Concannon obviously... It's
a dunt beforehand.
It's an awkward pull, right? And it's an awkward pull, and it goes across his shin. Now, anyone who gets a wallop on the shin, right?
Finish that. Go on.
The reaction would be one of
hurling people here. Yeah.
Frustration.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how would you take that frustration, out, Sarah?
That's just something that can't be accounted for in the rules.
Okay, like the pain that goes through your shin.
There's the rules, and then there's the hurling rules, and we all know that you're allowed to smack somebody across the face. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
You're absolutely not allowed to smack somebody across the face. But if I was to get a wallop in the shin with no shin guard on, that's the pain. The frustration is something that you just
automatically.
It's sickening,
right?
It is sickening.
But that's what. Okay, there's a rule book there for it. The linesman, it was on the sideline. The linesman should have seen it.
So there's a pair of them in it.
Kyle Hayes' reaction was silly. Okay, he's a long time in the game. He should have been able to restrain himself. He didn't. He got away with it, and then he wins the free late on.
It's not meaningless in the end of the So
absolutely,
Limerick seemed to have Galway at arm's length for the majority of the game. But if there'd been a sending off. Mm-hmm. You never know what would have happened.
Yeah, I don't know. Galway didn't deserve to win that game, okay? Limerick were head and shoulders above them in terms of their movement, their communication, even their physicality. And Anthony Nash spoke on Friday about winning moments in games, as opposed to increasing your purple patches, but specifically moments in games. And there was a moment in the first half where Galway looked like they were kind of coming up the field. Darragh O'Donovan thumped Jack Grealish, and I felt it in my bones. They were just repelling Galway. Like, that physicality was incredible. And Galway, if they had won that game, it would have been a steal. So for me, Galway yesterday, they have no forward movement. Their forward play is very, very weak.
It's a bit mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like we would expect it now again. The game being played in February is not the same game that'll be played at the end of April and May. Although it's close enough, it's probably closer than it has been in previous seasons. Like, we expect Galway to come through and be in an All-Ireland quarter-final at the very least, right? So how do they go from this static forward play now to being better in June?
Well, you've one of the best forwards in the country as their manager. I'm surprised that seems to be the thing that was most lacking yesterday. They genuinely didn't know who was moving into a pocket, and the person who was most frustrated was Conor Whelan. He just physically couldn't find space or couldn't get on a ball, and some of the ball that he distributed himself was very poor. So the communication within the Galway six isn't there yet. And for me, if I was Henry Shefflin, I'd be opening the playbook today and saying, right, how do I get these players moving into pockets? They'd one score early on, and you'll remember it. It was Conor Cooney's chance for a goal, which was actually the only goal in the game. And he comes onto it at pace. He's an incredible touch, and the ball is played out into the left-hand side, and it's the little dink pass, and he's through. He breaks the line. But at no other point in the game did Galway look like they were going to break the line.
And can they look at Limerick yesterday and how the Limerick forwards moved and how they pick up pockets of space and learn something from that, or are Limerick just so far ahead skill-wise that...
Actually, the majority of Limerick's scores came from out around the 45 yesterday. They got 25 points yesterday, and it was they were in between the 65 and the 45. I was surprised at Limerick actually that they didn't break the line yesterday. So what they seem to be doing, and Shane O'Brien is excellent at it, he comes out, he wins the ball, and then he's feeding back the field. Tom Morrissey, Cian Lynch, who picked up 3 points. That's where Limerick are a little surprised this year, in that they're not going for goals. And I don't know, is that because they're playing three? They're actually playing 3 across the line rather than
in the full forward line,
in 2 inside.
Right. Okay.
And get Flanagan, and I'm sorry to harp on about this, but the poor devil is missing Gillette no end, because he got a point yesterday late on. I'd say this is the lowest he's scored in the league in a number of years.
Before we go back to Limerick, what do Galway do in training over the next month to make sure that they begin to get that deep understanding of how each other can create space for each other?
I think that comes from their midfield. So the distribution yesterday from their half-backs and midfields wasn't fast enough. So I think you're looking at your midfields, you're looking at the likes of Sean Linan, and you're looking at kind of, I suppose, restricting the space, pulling the Galway forwards in towards the goal and leaving that space so that they can run out into the pockets, and then have the likes of Conor Cooney coming in at 11, because he's so physical and so direct. He needs to be coming through the centre, and the boys need to be playing him in.
Okay, from Limerick's perspective, the Tom Morrissey bravura performance, I didn't realise he was such a brilliant free taker. I guess maybe they have just a long line of free takers who are able to do what he's doing at the moment. Gillane aside, are we seeing anything different, or are they just getting better at what they've always been really good at?
I think yesterday their distribution was heading to shoulders above Galway. It's just those little pockets of space. It's the comfort. It's the 20-yard pass. So that pass from Barry Nash to Darragh O'Donovan, and then he flicks out to Tom Morrissey for the score. But if you look at Kyle Hayes at left half back, and then you look at Tom Morrissey outside him, they scored 7 to 10 points between them yesterday at their ease.
Yeah.
If I was playing against them, I'd be going, lads, I'm going in right half forward there. I'm not dealing with these boys. That left side is lethal. I hadn't seen them be so efficient up that left side. That was the winning of the game yesterday.
Where do you think Kyle Hayes starts in, say, the All Ireland semi-final or final this year? What position?
It has to be left back.
Do you think so?
It has to be, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They've got they've got so many options up front, and with Cian Lynch now at 11. It's if he wasn't there, you could see him, slotting in at 11. But
he's so good there; he can run the game from there.
From 7, yeah, he can run the game from 7. And what's interesting is he's really good at reading the play. So he'll hold his run, and then at the last second he'll bypass the Galway midfielder, which he was doing yesterday, and they're going, where did he come from? So he loves to get forward, and he's unmarkable.
The ease at which they pass it short, there was a few occasions yesterday where Nicky Quaid goes short to Richie English, goes on to Dan Morrissey, and every time their body shape is perfect, they're not taking any risks, there's no chance at all that they're going to drop it, they're protecting themselves in case there's a forward coming in, putting some pressure on. Why is it that they feel it, when you watch them and the short passing, which should be one of the most basic parts of the game, they look so much more comfortable than every other team?
Look, I think hurling is about repetition. It's literally drilling that. The simplest of actions is holding onto the ball, and Galway yesterday kept dropping the ball, allowing Limerick to step on them. If that's the thing that allows you to get out of difficulty, right? Limerick have targeted that, and if you saw yesterday as well, every time a player from Limerick was on the ball, they were coming forward 4 and 5 in a row. So there was literally they run like a semicircle, and they're all running together. So every fella knows he can take 4 steps, and he has an option right or left. It's just so neat.
We're kind of in that phase that we were in with the Dubs a couple of years ago, where it's like who's going to beat them, how are they going to beat them, can anybody beat them? And at the moment we don't really see anybody who's putting together a body of evidence to suggest that, unless it's going to be like a smash and grab bit of a fluke.
Look, if you allow Galway to stay in that game yesterday, which Limerick did. I don't know how Galway stayed in that game, but on 67 minutes, Galway were 2 points down. And then there's indiscipline. Kyle Hayes should have gone off, and Limerick would have been down to 14 players and potentially could have lost that game.
Okay.
So it's Limerick's to lose, because that indiscipline, as frustrating as it is to get a wallop in the shin, it's not worth, losing games. And
particularly later on in the year, yeah.
Yeah, because Garrow Takerty gave away free as well, which brought Galway back to 2. It's those it's that calmness under pressure that they probably didn't show as much of yesterday late on.
The Cork footballers were the real stars of the show in the doubleheader, scoring 6 goals. The hurlers only scored 2, and they kept Westmeath in the game. Like, hard for the Cork hurlers at this stage to get as excited about this league game as they have been about some of the other league games, because the performance has been excellent so far. So was this a bit complacency, or were they trying something else, or is this one of those weeks where they do a really hard block of training and they don't really care about the results?
But there was a cohort of lads there made their debuts for Cork, which is incredibly exciting for those lads. So for those lads, it meant the world to be in Páirc Uí Chaoimh yesterday. But obviously that has an impact on the momentum that Cork had built over the last 2 weeks. The Bars won the county last year, right? And yesterday 4 of the Bars lads got an opportunity to play together.
Right.
Conor Callahan, Ethan Toomey, Brian Hayes, and Ben Cunningham, right, Ger Cunningham's son. So they scored 6 points between them. That's a big return from a very young set of players, and that's really positive, because that was their first opportunity and they took it. He kept a bit of, I suppose, consistency in there, in that Shane Kingston was in, he scored 1-7. Shane Barrett scored 1-2. But it was that period after half-time where they scored 3 points in 15 minutes. That's not good enough. So that'll be what Pat Ryan will target in a couple of weeks, or in the next couple of weeks, to say, okay, we need to keep the scoreboard ticking over. You need to go probably 6 to 8 points in that 15-minute spell. It can't drop to 3.
We've been talking about the widening of the panel and more clarity of purpose about what everybody is being asked to do, and so far it feels like you think anyway that they're getting more decisions right than wrong at the moment.
Yeah, and look, there was, I think, 10 different clubs represented again yesterday, from Newtown Shandram with Cormac O'Brien to Newcestown with Luke Meade. He has spread the net so wide, and there's so many players come through. He's looking at 40 to 45 players, across the length of Cork, which I think is really exciting. And
it's hard to bed that down to like, so you've got to keep sifting to get to the bit where your match day squad is ready to go in. It's only 6 weeks now, is it?
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Well, Liam Griffin was on last week and he was talking about, producing more players to bring up the quality.
Yeah.
That's what has to happen in Cork. You have to produce more players to bring players up to the quality. So there'll be what's collateral damage, and there'll be lads will only get so far, but it'll allow.
Is this a multi-year project, like, in their heads, do you think, or are they thinking that there's a possibility that a team can flare out the way, like?
It has to be a multi-year project. If you saw Dan Morrissey and Tom Morrissey yesterday in their post-match interview, very wholesome interview, 2 very wholesome men. The conditioning of Dan Morrissey, lads, like, Cork don't have that right now, so they need 2 years of putting on that bulk to be able to.
Were the Limerick lads taking their tops off again? Is that what happened?
He didn't need to.
The tight jersey.
It's always accidental, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll take the smaller top.
Well, they were.
Let's just release the pictures.
What? Yeah, very impressive. But I'm talking about their conditioning and what it allows them to do. Dan Morrissey caught a ball out of the sky yesterday at 6. Declan Hannon wasn't even playing yesterday.
That's what I'm trying to work out. So if Kyle Hayes is playing, is Declan Hannon not playing?
Oh, no, I would, okay, and this is...
Oh, you mean pick him at a...
I would say Dan Morrissey may end up at 3.
Okay.
So Richie English is playing at 3 at the minute. I would say Dan realistically will play at 3, Declan at 6.
Right. And then
Jeremy Burns at 5.
They're only bringing on Gerard Hegarty with 15 minutes to go.
I know. They're just making sure that everybody is.
Yeah. Now I suppose if you look at yesterday, a couple of instances under the high ball, Limerick weren't as good. out on the right yesterday under the high ball. So you can see where Garrett Hegarty will plug back in with his ease.
There is part of this where everybody should try and watch as much of the Limerick hurlers as they possibly can, because it's like all-time great team playing all-time great stuff and still in that sweet spot of desperate to break the records and have all the... I don't really believe in hunger as a thing. Like, I think the best teams generally win because they're the best teams, but they still have this insatiable desire to be seen to be the best and to break all the records that Kilkenny have set in the past. And
well, yeah, as evidenced by Darragh Donovan yesterday.
I think the Dubs are in their sights. I don't think that they want to be the first hurling team to do 5. They want to be the first GAA team to do whatever, you know.
Yeah, I think it's there for them. I think as a group, I suppose the only sticking point now is Gillane. So whether Gillane will be back for championship or not. There's 8 weeks there. He was playing soccer last week by all accounts, so
at least he's fit. Soccer fit.
Well, look, I think they've only scored 1 goal in 3 games, so I think it'll
be mutually beneficial for everybody to decide that now's the time for him to come back.
I miss him anyway.
Yeah. All right.
You didn't even mention Wexford. Got to give one line. Holy Jesus.
Yeah.
Conceded 4-17 in the first half.
Yeah.
How the hell do you come back from that?
Well, you have to hope that it's a one-off and that next week somehow they fix it, because otherwise they're on the verge of slipping into irrelevancy again, which we thought they'd fixed.
They have massive injuries, long-term injuries. Clare were playing like angry men yesterday in that first half. Obviously, Tony Kelly was back. Quinlan was back at 6. They looked more like themselves, but Wexford weren't even tracking them. At one stage, David Reedy headed off up the line to get his goal, and it was like a...
If Clare hadn't had the letdown in last year's All-Ireland semi-final, we'd be talking about them as contenders now because of what they did to Limerick in Munster. That maybe we just need to forget about that, and the truth about Clare is their performance in the Munster final, and actually they're the ones who we should be thinking about as the potential to knock off Limerick.
They certainly looked more like the performances that they had last year, and Peter Duggan, Mark Rogers got a great goal. They were... I'm not going to take anything from it because Wexford just didn't show up yesterday.
Yeah.
Bar Conor MacDonald's class goal, but you know that was needle in a haystack stuff yesterday for Wexford.
Okay. A couple of quick comments for you from a little bit earlier on. Some credit for Westmeath, better performance compared to other games. It's just hard to give Westmeath and to a certain extent Antrim credit for those games until they start winning them. Graham Shaw says Manchester United overachieving. Really, look at your wage bill, Andy. Biggest spenders should win. But they've always been the biggest spenders over the last decade or so, and they've always been terrible. So
yeah, I think what the big spending has done is given them a good base of players, but clearly they've needed the right manager as well.
United fan. A long time United fan.
And feeling it?
It was the Milk Cup, wasn't it? Look, it was fine. It was fine. I love that Casemiro got the header. He's my new Kinchelskis.
I was playing Sarah in FIFA last week in the Virgin Media Games room, and she said that Andrea Kinchelskis was her favourite Manchester United player growing up. And I said she was the first person I've ever met from Cork who didn't say Roy Keane.
It was 1994. It was Roy hadn't, made himself as relevant as he is now.
You're just revealing her age there, Nathan.
Well, the Milk Cup, I think, revealed her age.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
We've come from awful heights down to being relieved over a trophy yesterday.
This is the staging post, though. It does feel like it's the start of something as opposed to...
Absolutely.
100 million for Anthony is not good recruitment. They only got Casemiro when the Rabiot deal fell through. I'm not convinced of Ten Hag's recruitment just yet. Rashford's form is overshadowing this, says Niall Daly.
I think we don't know on all of that yet. We don't know if 100 million for Anthony is too much. The money is somewhat irrelevant for Manchester United. And is this Rashford's form, or is this just Rashford now?
Yeah.
Maybe this is just him. Like, there's no reason why he's not a 35-40 goal in all competitions striker for the next 2 or 3 years.
Ten Hag is making Wan-Bissaka look like a footballer. So
I think that's the thing, isn't it?
That's the key.
He has his Varane and Casemiro, absolute elite. He's brought in players that he knows in Anthony and Lisandro Martinez. But he's made Wan-Bissaka, Shaw, Rashford. He's brought them to a level that nobody thought possible 6 months ago.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that.
Nathan needs to watch Man United a bit more. Screw you, Nathan. Basically, the theme of
I watch Manchester United every weekend. Tune into Off the Ball on Sundays.
Whether Ireland lose in the quarterfinals again doesn't take away from a series win in New Zealand and a potential Grand Slam, says Leonardo da Vinci. Nice of you to
get that message in 6 months early.
There you go. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And Colin reliably points out Andrei Kanchelskis was Manchester United's top Premier League scorer in his last season before the Everton sale. Never did quite get the full story of that sale to Everton, the shady goings on, but sure, look. Anyway, don't miss all the action in Rugby Daily today in your OTB podcast feed, bringing you everything you need to know about rugby. It's all in partnership with Deliveroo. Deliveroo has some great bundles and deals, so open the app, make your choice, and watch your rider come to you. Deliveroo, food, we get it. On tomorrow's show, Derek McNamara breaks down the stats from Italy, Ireland with a full comparison of the difference between Johnny Sexton and Ross Byrne. Tommy Rooney is going to talk to us about the weekend's Gaelic football and plenty more besides. Right now, the best of the Sunday paper review. Have an incredible day.
But there's one on trans rules in ladies Gaelic football on the bottom of page 19, which is a really good summation of what's going on in GAA if you're curious, because I just wasn't sure where this sport was on this issue. Obviously the IRFU followed the advice of World Rugby in effectively banning trans women from playing rugby. So the LGFA, it seems, caught everybody on the hop here. So I didn't understand the context, or I wasn't aware of the context. In effect, the LGFA made their announcement, which we'll come to in a moment, but put out their policy. And as Michael Foley writes, the phones at Croke Park and the offices of the GPA started hopping with difficult questions, but they had no answers. The LGFA had moved unilaterally, without a word to anyone. Not the GAA, not the GPA, not the Camogie Association. To make things more awkward, he says, they haven't offered any insight into the logic and science behind the rule. So those organisations, the GAA, the Camogie Association, they had thought that they were all moving together in lockstep on this one. The LGFA is part of a working group, which includes the GAA, the Camogie Association and other sporting authorities. And so what had happened is that Sport Ireland was undertaking similar work, and when that became apparent, the three organisations said, "Oh well, we'll put a pause in our working group and let's wait and see what Sport Ireland suggest, and we'll go from there." But Michael Foley says events overtook events. Last August, the LGFA, the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, had to deal with a dispute over the eligibility of a trans woman who lined out in a club game in Dublin, and so the new LGFA rule now allows transgender girls between 12 and 15 to play ladies football. That's subject to approval by the LGFA's Transgender Application Committee. If you're over 16, you'll only be allowed to compete if you can provide medical records showing testosterone levels in the previous year are less or equal to 10 nanomoles per litre of blood. And that policy will be reviewed every 3 years. Now, Michael points out in his piece, for now, we're talking about small numbers here. In ladies football and camogie, 6 players of the entire playing population are in this bracket. As for that Sport Ireland work, which is, as he says, been slow and painstaking, their final conclusions are expected by most stakeholders to leave responsibility for transgender policy with each individual sporting organisation. And that, to be fair, is what the Olympics have done. They've said to each organisation, you figure out your own policy. And so Michael sums up the various issues here. In particular, the scientific one being that this testosterone levels science, it just doesn't address the residual benefits of full male puberty, which are significant. And so the idea that testosterone is some kind of panacea and that there is a neat solution out there is just not true. We've had conversations on this show, Ross Tucker and others, and he is adamant that testosterone levels, is but a fraction of the scientific solution here. And so that's where the LGFA are, and it's case by case basis, but ultimately the testosterone solution is the one they've gone for, and GAA and Camogie Association are thinking, okay, I'm not sure what we do in the short term. So this is a difficult issue. This is going to be a big issue for the next number of decades.
It is. It's a very calm and measured piece by Michael Foley, and you need to be calm and measured with this issue because there's a lot of hysteria around it, and it's been weaponised by people for their own ends. I read a very good book recently called American Psychosis by David Cord of the New York Times, and it looks at the history of the creation of moral panics by factions of the Republican Party in America over the last 150 years. Things like Joe McCarthy and the Reds under the bed scares in the 1950s, the rise of the Tea Party, the various evangelical figures who became huge in the 80s, etc. But one thing that became clear reading that book is that the American right latched onto the trans issue about 25 years ago, and have created so much scaremongering about it, and they used the same kind of dehumanising language that they used about gay people before that. And this is incredibly complex. And I know I've taken a bit of heat before by just saying that I'm just in favour of trans women taking over women's sport, and it's not. That's not the case. What I would say is that it's very, very difficult, and I have no solution, because most people look at it either as a sporting issue or a human rights issue, and it's very hard to find the point where you can keep both sides happy. Michael hints at that. He said the objection for any sports organisation dealing with this issue boils down to finding that tricky point in the graph where inclusiveness, fairness and safety all intersect. And I think Sport Ireland are right in this, in letting individual organisations make their own ruling on it, because sports are so different. Like a contact sport, clearly, if you have advantages from male puberty, it's more of an advantage in a contact sport than it would be in, say, badminton. That there are other sports, it wouldn't be such a factor, or snooker or whatever. But there's also, I'm very aware of the lack of trans voices in this debate. Because a couple of media outlets covered this week, and I heard them getting praised. People have been ignoring that, and you've covered it. But they had women on, as right woman would be, because it's obviously a huge issue if you're involved in women's sport, but it's also a huge issue if you're a trans person. And very few people are approaching trans people and seeing where they're coming from. And you see this now, like a trans community do feel under siege. Like you see what's happened with Wilson Hospital School and Enoch Burke, and how that, the poor kid at the centre of that, something that's making global headlines, what they must feel like. Excuse me, I don't want to be a bit careful about this, because I don't want to identify anybody, but I know of someone, a trans woman, excuse me, but she, when she was going through transition, she was referred to a psychologist. And after a while, the psychologist started using language that troubled her, because it was all bringing in hell and damnation, etc. And when she left that psychologist, she did a bit of research into the guy she'd met, that psychologist, and who he is and his background. And it turned out he's a member of Opus Dei. And why she was referred to somebody and why he's dealing with people going through transition is incredible. And if you think, that this moral hysteria, this moral panic about trans people has been stoked up again and again. And you think back 25 years ago, Hayley Cropper was a trans character, was introduced to Coronation Street as a trans character, and there was very little comment on it. In the 1970s and 1980s, Jan Moore, as a trans woman, was a prominent writer and broadcaster on the BBC, and there was very little comment on it. So you go back 25, 40, 50 years ago, people got on with it and didn't think it was as much, but now it's become very much a hot issue, and an issue that has no easy solutions, and people are trying to find a way, as you say. It's right that Sport Ireland have been slow and laborious in this, because if you make a knee-jerk decision on this, I think you're in very problematic territory.
And in that sense, Kieran, why have the LGFA gone on a solo run here? Surely the safety in numbers
it
approach.
says here they had to deal with an issue in a club game in Dublin. They had to
I remember that hitting the headlines
on that, and so that almost they feel forced their hand, and they had to come up with a solution sooner rather than later. I mean, I do think it is poor in the extreme that they're not explaining their decision, how they reached their decision, talking to the media at length, how they presented the decision. You do have to point out that the International Olympic Committee of the testosterone solution said those rules are not fit for purpose. So I think the LGFA, if they're going to come out and make this ruling, they have to explain it. They can't just say, this is our position. We're not going to detail, it's very complicated. We're not going to detail how we reach this position. I think that's poor. Now, look, maybe it's a smaller organisation. I'm sure the media backlash is a scary prospect and they're trying to come away from it. I would have said the IRFU, when they made their judgment and along World Rugby lines, they weren't forthcoming with the media either.
Yeah.
I remember that week we were like, can you please come on and let's discuss this? And not, if we say nothing for a week, it all goes away. And it does all go away.
Yeah.
So that's not great. And the LGFA probably should be more proactive in their public dealings on this issue. But that's the reason they've not jumped the gun, but they've been forced to move more quickly.
Yeah, like even to say that the policy will be reviewed every 3 years. Like 3 years seems a long time in an area that there are, pretty rapid developments in at the moment. It's I don't know. I just think they could have rode in with everybody else a little bit more and got every, I know it's very, very hard to get consensus here, but I understand the player last year and that bringing it to light, but I just find it very strange that they've gone the solo run here. It's definitely drawn attention.
It has. Maybe you could say that's brave on their part to take a stance and make a move for their members that they feel is right. That's the other side of that coin, to be fair to them. But,
if they've come up with a measurement or a solution that we're all going, that seems bang on, but they've come up with a solution that, as you've stated, has already been written off as adequate.
Well, see, this is and it's so complicated.
I know there is no solution. There is.
From a scientific point of view, if you had Ross Tucker on, he would say it's inadequate. That testosterone that's inadequate. Like, I mean, you've a 6'4", 28-year-old male, strong, healthy, transitions a year of lower testosterone. A lot of those residual benefits stay, and that's where the safety issue comes in. But as Kieran says, then you take if you take a wider step, what is sport? Philosophically, and where do human rights come into it? Where does social inclusion come into it? What outweighs the other? And IRFU and rugby have said, well, safety is paramount. LGFA have pitched it at a more inclusive level here, and they're probably going to see how that goes.
And also, some of the loudest voices in this, it's pretty clear they don't believe trans is a real thing. Whereas, as scientists and psychologists, etc., do accept, and the law of the land in Ireland now accepts that, you can be born, a woman can be born into a man's body, and it's a right and it's a legitimate thing to transition, and that that there's a history there that shows, this isn't an affectation or something like that. This is something real. But I think there's people who keep pushing it. The opposite, and who refuse to accept that a trans woman is a woman, for example, whereas, the law of the land says that is the case.
It's on page 19 of the Sunday Times. We're going to be talking about this for months and years ahead. I think probably a sport by sport decision is how this is going to go. And it's those semi-physical sports that would be the trickiest areas to navigate, You, Shane, picked out a short piece Michael Dignan had written on hurling promotion in the country.
Yeah, and I suppose, to be honest with you, the reason it caught my eye was because of the Liam Griffin piece with yourselves during the week. So there was a motion, let me get the exact nature of it. There was a motion taken to Congress during the week to make dual from 7 to 10, is it compulsory across the club or across the country? So I'll get the exact phrase of it here. Yeah, it was his own club, St Mary's in Rossmore, aimed at protecting hurling as part of our heritage and culture, developing dual nurseries so that clubs would have to introduce hurling as well as football from under 7 to under 10 level where go games are played. Coming from the position that I'm coming from, I thought that would have been an absolutely fantastic measure. At the same time, does it surprise me that it didn't get voted through? Probably not. I'm the Games Promotions Officer with Portlaoise GAA Club. Over the last 10 to 15 years, I suppose thereabouts, Portlaoise as a football club, they had a huge amount of success, I suppose, for a 10-year period. Not so much success at the moment. It's dropped off a bit now, all right. But during that period of time, Portlaoise hurling, they dropped formerly, a team that would have been competing for championships very, very much in the 80s and 90s, aren't even competing at senior level at the moment anymore. Which, given the population of Portlaoise, really isn't justifiable. Now, there's huge measures been taken in Portlaoise GA Club to try and rectify that, and we have done exactly this. We have made it compulsory from under 7 to under 10 that all teams are dual, and we're already seeing the benefits of it, I think, and we'll certainly see the benefits of it going forward.
When you say all teams are dual, do you mean like an under 10s football team now split their time between football and hurling?
Exactly. That's
so
exactly
on
what I mean.
Tuesday we're going to practice football, and on Thursday's training, here are your hurls.
Now it becomes more nuanced than that, Joe, because if we say that, then they will choose which ones they will turn up to. If they like football but aren't particularly into hurling, they might appear at Tuesday's training session but not appear at Thursdays. So the only way to get around that is that all sessions are half and half.
Are there any 7-year-olds going down with a hamstring?
No, not really. No,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that was the only way to try and get around it. And there's no doubt, the argument will be, well, you can't force an 8-year-old who doesn't want to play camogie if she only wants to play football. Well, we kind of have to try and force. We kind of have to try and force her, because
and walk the line though of not resulting in dropout.
Absolutely, and you can't. When I say try and force her, obviously you're not going to get into a row and all that. And if
you haven't hit children with hurls, is that what you're telling me?
No, exactly. There's nobody roaring and shouting at them and telling them they absolutely have to, but they are very, very, very much encouraged, because you could have a 7-year-old girl or 7-year-old boy who, looking at the game of hurling, because it is quite physical and you will get a belt and you probably will get hurt. Chances of somebody going down crying in our hurling training sessions compared to our football training sessions is tenfold, obviously, and therefore it's understandable that there might be a little bit of a fear factor around it. But if you teach them the basic skills properly and teach them how to block properly and teach them how to protect themselves properly, I have seen plenty of cases of somebody who, if they were given the choice, wouldn't have played hurling at all. 12 months later, they are flourishing and they're loving it, and that's brilliant to see. Absolutely brilliant to see. Now,
how commonplace do you think that is across clubs?
Trying to impose dual? Yeah, there wouldn't be too many dual clubs in Laois. You could count on one hand how many dual clubs there would be in Laois. Laois is very, very particular geography. You take Portlaoise has been the centre of Laois. Everything to the west of Portlaoise is hurling. Everything to the east of Portlaoise is football. That makes sense. Kilkenny's to the west, Kildare and Dublin are to the east, and that's how it breaks up. Now you do have, because I go into schools and do a huge amount of coaching, and there is an awful lot of logistics around it. Like, I arrive into a school to do a Gaelic football training session.
Easy.
Couple of bibs, football, let's go. Whereas, there's a massive multinational base in Portlaoise at the moment, where a lot of these kids, may never have seen a game of hurling in their life before, never mind own their own helmet or own their own hurl. So when I'm arriving at school to do hurling, we got to the stage where, well, there's no point in saying whoever has a helmet can play hurling, because we'll have almost nobody. So I arrive in with 2 bags full. I have about 30 helmets arriving into the school, because it's the only way to get around that problem, and another bag full of hurls in various different sizes. But when you do go the extra length to try and make it possible, it's amazing how much they love it. It's absolutely amazing how much they love it.
Interesting. Kieran, I would put it to you, and the GAA could be the greatest sporting organisation on the planet. And there's a real argument. Its great failing is that hurling is still played in so few counties at such a high level.
Yeah. Well, I think without a doubt it is great failing. Like, at a serious level, it's barely a quarter of the counties. So that's in a very small island.
Do you anticipate that changing?
Very gradually, very slowly. Because there has to be and there's also an expense. Because to get to the level, say like a Donegal or a Mayo, or like a Division 1 counties that are consistently Division 1 in football, to get to a competitive level in hurl or football costs a fair amount of money. So they would have to match that investment and probably go beyond it to get much more competitive in hurling. You know, and there's, as things stand, counties are having a lot of trouble with finance at the moment. But just from what Shane was saying there, like my own experience in Dublin, just taking the young fella, I won't say the club, but like to a local club, and like the Dublin nurseries, GA nurseries, start at 4 and 5. They start very young, but
that's too late to start hurling.
but my experience is like, I don't know if that's across the board in clubs, but from my experiences, they start them with hurling. And that is, as you say, that can be challenging for some clubs because they're very small kids, and they will get a belt early on. And even some of them get a little bit freaked out about having to wear a helmet. You know, the first day they come in, they're fitted for a helmet and they're measured for a stick and stuff. And it's easier. They're more comfortable with the ball because, like, from probably 2, they've been kicking a ball around. So, but that is the thinking, that you need to start very young. But then you look at Sean O'Halpine, who didn't pick up a hurl till he was 12, and he did all right. So,
you ever seen a hurler's hands though?
Yeah.
It's not the best advertisement. You wouldn't want to show your 7-year-olds that image and say, this could be you one day.
Probably not. There's be a fair few war wounds there, all right, that's for sure. Look, I suppose one of the big issues I would have with the whole thing, and it works both ways, by the way, it's not just me saying that, you know, predominantly football clubs don't want hurling coming anywhere near them. My own club would be a hurling club that would play a small bit of junior C football, would be the extent of it. But we would have produced a dual county player over the last couple of years at underage level and minor and 20s. I think now he's been a dual player at both. And there would be that a hell of a lot of people who would have that angle within our club. You know, why did we ever let him near the football? Or, you know, could we not have stopped him going near the football? I don't know if it's going to be full concentration on his hurling now, and he's such a fantastic young hurler. Do we need football in his head? You know, that. Whereas, you know, my God, if we've got somebody who's able to represent our county at 2 codes, should we not be shouting from the rooftops that this is fantastic, you know?
There is coverage of Jarlath Burns's prospective presidency across all the papers, and we can talk any specifics you want, Kieran, but certainly like there's the question
OTB AM with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor.